Don't miss the awesome Naruto stories my sister creates. Her last channel was hacked, so to stay in the loop, please subscribe to her new channel. It would mean a lot to her, and you won't regret it. Hello to all lovers of lemon scenes. I invite you all to my boosty so you can watch your favorite Naruto What If stories in complete comfort. A subscription to Naruto Lemon, the first video with a full lemon, is already on my boosty channel. Dare! Guy announced, dressed in traditional Hokage robes and adjusting his hat on his head. People greeted the hero of Konoha with enthusiastic exclamations and expressed their desire to have a hand in saving the world at all costs. The next day, a huge number of volunteers volunteered for the United Shinobi Alliance Army. Early in the morning, the Hokage summoned Naruto and Kimiko to tell them everything they knew about Akatsuki and identify their possible weaknesses. Mikoto was also present as this information could be related to Itachi. And after Uzumaki's revelation, the girl had the feeling that she simply needed to meet the elder Uchiha. Kimiko looked uncertainly first at her friend, who supported her with a nod, then at Naruto, whose violet eyes were thoughtfully fixed on the portrait of the fourth Hokage on the wall. I was once a candidate to join Akatsuki. My abilities were more than interesting to the leader, his name was Pain. This man was testing me, wondering if I was suitable for Akatsuki. He instilled fear in my soul and possessed truly divine power. Young Hitaki listed the other members of the organization whom she had seen and told everything that she remembered. But when Joker and I escaped from Amigakure, we met Itachi. He said that Akatsuki was no more, and Pain was dead. Now Itachi is the head of the village, hiding behind the mask of a long-dead man. Knowing him, I would assume that he is not related to that creepy tree with the ominous chakra that you talked about. It turns out that Itachi is the last member of Akatsuki. And he had nothing to do with it. No, I believe someone else survived. And it is very possible that the tree and all the strange things that happen around it are his doing. The samurai of the Land of Iron were like nuts to him. Let's see how he can stand alone against the United Alliance. So we are going to the Land of Iron to destroy it? All? Like one big army? Joker asked, looking thoughtfully at Might, who folded his hands and looked at Kimiko. You three, no. I want you to go to Amigakure. And they met Itachi. What? Mikoto couldn't believe her ears. The last thing she expected was for the sixth Hokage to make such a decision. I said that everyone should unite, Guy reminded, smiling and realizing that he had puzzled all three young shinobi. Including old enemies. He looked at Naruto, who clenched his fists at the mention of Sasuke's brother's name. After all, it was he who once helped Akatsuki catch him and save him from the Nine Tails. Itachi won't help us, it's at least unprofitable for him. Besides, we don't know for sure whose side he's on, said Uzumaki. I can convince him, Mikoto said quietly. Then consider this your S-rank mission called Black Crow. Our task now is to find as many allies as possible. Let me remind you that now our alliance lacks one great village, nodded the sixth. Besides, Itachi is a former Konoha shinobi. And without him, Konoha will not be as strong as it should be. Mikoto smiled. It seems that Guy promised to become the most unusual of the Hokages. His thinking was radically different from the way ordinary people were used to thinking. It is unlikely that the third would have made such a decision as the green beast dared. Go and do it in the name of the power of youth, said Guy. You will be a help at the most needed time. And I will lead our army. They continued on their way. A long road remained behind, which the team covered in record time. And ahead loomed the gloomy vision of a city with skyscrapers. Above which clouds, as always, swirled, bringing down endless rain on Amigakure. Naruto and Mikoto's hands clasped each other. The first experienced complex feelings when he returned to his second home, where he hid and gained strength for several long years. The second froze, feeling that somewhere out there, among the towers piercing the sky, was Itachi, her flesh and blood. He probably didn't even know who she really was. Kimiko looked at her friends, involuntarily lowering her gaze to their hands, and sighed. Like the Joker, returning to this place was not easy for her. So, what is next? Shall we rush inside and look for Itachi? The Uchiha asked uncertainly. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, onto which a drop of water fell from the sky. It's no longer necessary, he already knows that we're here, said Kimiko, noticing this. Naruto gritted his teeth and stepped back half a step, fixing his violet eyes on a flock of ravens that flew out of the thick clouds and, notifying everyone of their approach with loud cries, flew towards them. The next moment, the birds, loudly flapping their wings and continuing to croak frighteningly, formed a funnel in which a brunette man appeared in a cloak with a pattern of red clouds on black fabric. Itachi, said the Joker. Black eyes, in which red lights lit up, focused on the blonde man in a purple cloak. There was an unkind coldness in them. I think I made it clear that you don't come back, the Uchiha said, looking at Naruto and Kimiko. It is he. Itachi. How I'm itching to destroy it. I didn't really want to. It seems that the sixth came up with a bad plan, Uzumaki muttered, and his hand slowly reached for his pocket with a deck of cards. Stop, Kimiko grabbed his hand. We didn't come here for that. Remember what our mission is. The former Jinchuriki flinched, but still removed his hand, looking at Kimiko with an indignant look, and then slowly nodding. She's right, thought the gambler. Kimiko is much more like a shinobi of the village than I am. Thinks about the mission, not about revenge, flashed through his head with the next burst of thoughts. Everything like Kakashi-sensei, Naruto grinned to himself. Itachi. We've come with peace. Remember when you said that we are no longer enemies? Young Hatake turned to the Uchiha. And he also said that I don't care about you, Itachi reminded, letting the white-haired kunoichi with green eyes understand that she and Naruto could not count on support. And before me? Mikoto asked, stepping forward and drawing the attention of her older brother Sasuke to herself. When she caught the gaze of red eyes with 3 Tomo, she shuddered. What are you doing here, Mom? He muttered, emphasizing the last word. What you said? Kimiko whispered. So you know, Mikoto squeezed out, feeling her heart beat faster in her chest. I guessed everything myself. At our last meeting, the Uchiha nodded. Sorry for what happened. If I had known that you were you already then, everything would have changed. Itachi. How do I make you feel? Said the mother, realizing that he did not dislike her. But he doesn't show warm feelings either. Grief. And repentance for what I did, he responded gloomily. But all my actions had their reasons. I didn't do anything for nothing. Sasuke doesn't know anything? Kimiko asked, surprised by this turn of events, although she was the one who noticed Mikoto's resemblance to Sasuke's mother. No. And he also doesn't know where you are, Naruto said and turned to Itachi. I kept my word and didn't tell him anything. Sasuke worked with Danzo. He became different. And in the end he left the village, just like you. That's how it is, muttered the Uchiha. Since you now know about your connection with Mikoto, maybe you'll join us and return an old debt to Konoha? Joker reluctantly suggested, playing with cards in his pocket. The Hokage said we need the 5th great village to replace Kirigakure. We will need your army. Itachi looked thoughtfully back at the village, where it continued to rain. The Uchiha sighed. Help us, you've already done a lot, said Mikoto. It's time to atone for your guilt. We need to stop the one who guards the tree at all costs and destroy it. Zetsu. So you know, muttered the elder Uchiha. He's preparing something big. It's no wonder that even the great villages have noticed this now. Zetsu? Naruto asked. The last surviving Akatsuki member besides me. All this time I thought that Tobi was in charge of everything, building his own plan, different from Nagato and me, but in fact, all this time he was the unspoken leader of Akatsuki, Itachi muttered. And God only knows what he's capable of. He was always the most secretive. Did you try to stop him? Kimiko asked, remembering Zetsu, a creature of two halves, black and white. He has the eyes of Nagato. Pain. And limitless power, against which I am powerless, the Uchiha shook his head. So what happened to Akatsuki? Naruto asked, completely confused. We destroyed each other. Pain and Tobi had different views on the future of the organization and this world. And the only way to resolve this issue was a battle, as a result of which Kirigakure disappeared. In it, the Akatsuki killed each other, and only Zetsu and I were left alive, Itachi muttered. Pain had an idea to create a better world. Tobi had his own ideas about what this better world should become. But now the very concept of peace is under threat, and I will never know which of them was right if it is destroyed. So, are you with us? Mikoto was surprised. She didn't expect her son to agree so quickly. But one glance was enough to make it clear that all this was for her sake. No matter how Itachi tried to hide his emotions, certain little things could not go unnoticed by the Uchiha. After all, she was his mother, although she did not remember what it was like. Me and my village, Itachi nodded. And here they are, muttered the black and white creature standing on one of the majestic roots of the tree, digging into the ground. From afar one could see the approaching army of the United Shinobi Alliance. Their march was truly loud. A countless army was approaching the tree, led by the 4 Kage and Mifune. So, the army of the 4 great villages? And all for the sake of destroying you and this tree? Sasuke grinned, standing to the left of Akatsuki. It's not just a tree, Sasuke-kun. This is something beyond your imagination. What gave birth to shinobi? My mother, Zetsu answered mysteriously, turning his head in his direction and giving the brunette a Rinnegan look. Kagaya Otsutsuki, the one who brought chakra to this world, hissed Orochimaru, who stood at the right hand of the black and white ally who promised them a new world and domination in it. This promises to be interesting. How great, Minato smiled next to the creator, looking at the approaching army. Surprisingly harmonious for those who once fought bloody wars with each other. Orochimaru-sama, I think this is just great. Well, let's welcome our guests, Zetsu said and exchanged glances with the scientist in the girl's body. He nodded. They simultaneously began to form different seals, and the next moment, an army of white Zetsu emerged from the ground in the path of the combined forces of the Shinobi Alliance. And behind them, at the last line towards the tree, several coffins emerged from the ground. When they completely jumped out of the soil, the lids of the coffins fell back, and from the darkness of the unknown, those whose feet had not been in this world for a long time stepped onto the solid ground of the land of iron. That's what's great. An army, perfect in everything, grinned Uchiha Shin, who brought up the rear of their line, looking around at the legion of white clones with his Sharingans. Pain, Konan, Deidara, Kisame, Sasori, Haiden, Kakuzu and Tobi, Zetsu muttered. And everyone is now subject to my will? This is impressive. Thank you, Orochimaru responded. In Hinata's body, he could take on even more terrifying intonations. This is not all I can do. The most interesting thing you will see later. A dark-haired girl with already noticeably pale skin turned her gaze to the Alliance forces. Who stopped, not knowing what to do. Despite their numbers, they clearly did not expect such a confrontation. Well, then we should intervene, Sasuke said, reaching for his tanto and preparing to jump down to join the ranks of the white Zetsu. Save your strength, Sasuke-kun. For now, I and our dead puppets will do this, Zetsu stopped him. Maybe your help won't be needed at all. I will absorb enough chakra to awaken the tree. When the mother comes back to life, this world will be different. And you all have a special place in it. How long will your clones stand against the four Kage? Minato doubted. They will surprise you, Minato-kun, Orochimaru grinned, as if he knew in advance what would happen next. Meanwhile, the other army perceived the army that appeared in front of them as a real threat and regrouped. I wonder where Naruto and Mikoto are? Choji asked. To overcome their excitement, he and his comrades talked among themselves. And Kimiko has disappeared somewhere, Niji noted. They couldn't just disappear like that, Shikamaru muttered, looking at his friends confidently. I think the Hokage tasked them with something urgent. Surely Gai-sensei sent them on a secret mission, Lee supported him. What could be more urgent than another, the most ambitious mission in shinobi history, on which all four great villages went at once? Tenten grinned. Their conversation was interrupted when white humanoid creatures appeared on the shinobi's path, immediately forming an even formation of the enemy army. Army, follow your Kage! Exclaimed Guy, who this time wore his usual green tights. The best strategy was for the Kage to lead the armies of their villages and lead them into battle, knowing the weaknesses and strengths of their own soldiers. This tactic was proposed precisely by Might, who continued to surprise everyone with his unusual actions in the role of the sixth Hokage. Regroup! Groaned the third Tsuchikage, an old man who, as if by magic, hovered in the air a meter above the ground. The next moment, the army carried out the order, instantly forming into 5 long columns. Forward! Ras, dressed in a black combat uniform, shouted, raising his golden hand and thereby giving a signal to his people to line up accordingly. Let's destroy them. The dark-skinned athlete fourth Raikage in a white cloak supported the Kazekage and Hokage. Samurai, to arms! Mifune commanded his troops. Zetsu, who saw and heard everything that happened thanks to his Rinnegan, smiled. Everything went according to his plan. Let the game begin, said the black and white villain, his violet eyes flashing. There was no end to the hordes of identical white creatures that looked like people. The fierce battle, probably not inferior in scale to the battles of the Great Wars, was in no hurry to end. The united shinobi army continued to make its way to the Great Tree, where those who were not yet eager to engage in battle were waiting for it. They only watched as people died in a bloody battle and the white Zetsu were destroyed. But who cared about consumables when the fate of the world was at stake, which these 5 had to take into their own hands after everything was over? Behold my art! Ehahaha! A huge white bird flew over the most successful detachment of the army, carrying a long-haired shinobi in an Akatsuki cloak. Explosion! Many small bombs fell down, and the next moment a series of explosions thinned out the army, again giving the white Zetsu an advantage. Deidara, smiling contentedly, looked at the fruits of his efforts with an enthusiastic glance. Conan flew at the army from the other flank, and a cloud of paper shuriken would also have left many victims, if not for the stone wall that several ninjas erected together, quickly making the necessary seals, and thereby saving many lives, including their own. Water release, multiple shark bombs. Kisame, also resurrected by Orochimaru's technique, did not skimp on jutsu. First, his enemies were washed away by a powerful wave created by a shark-like shinobi out of thin air, but now shark-shaped water projectiles hit those who survived the initial attack. Multiple poison needles. A red-haired doll, practically indistinguishable from a person, hovering on wings with rotating metal elements, opened its mouth, and senbon, smeared with deadly poison, were shot at the enemies. Not far away, a fearless ash-haired ninja with a bare torso was wielding a scythe, since the cloak hampered his movements, and in order to handle such an exotic weapon, their absolute freedom was required. A ninja in a rag mask and hood, summoning 4 creatures in masks made of a black substance, pressed back opponents with the power of all 5 elements, and he himself periodically burst into a crowd of enemies and attacked them hand to hand, shooting with arms detached from the body and breaking necks with a stone grip. Divine attraction, said the former Akatsuki leader, summoned in his real body in creating 3 metal supports for himself instead of weak legs. The Rinnegan glowed in his eyes, but very dimly. After all, these were not real eyes, but a reproduction created by the Edo Tensei technique. He pulled the victim towards him with the power of thought and thrust a metal rod extended from his palm directly into her head. A powerful blow pierced the skull, and the bloody, sharp end of the pipe came out of the back of the poor man's head, along with the remains of his brain, which had turned to mush. "Fire element, wild dance!" exclaimed the ninja, half of whose face was disfigured with scars. He was no longer hiding behind a mask. After the shinobi exhaled a powerful stream of fire, the Mangekyo Sharingan in his eye spun, distorting space, and turning the fiery stream into a spiral of flames rushing towards his enemies. The black and white man took an appraising glance at the fruits of the efforts of the mad scientist, thanks to whose technique his army had become much stronger, and looked at the dark-haired girl in whose body Orochimaru now lived. They fight as if the conflict that separated them never happened at all. Even Nagato and Obito obey us unconditionally, Zetsu muttered. The dead are completely under the power of my technique. The former Hinata licked her lips, and although her tongue did not have time to turn into a snake, the Hyuga with a new voice, look and habits of Orochimaru was no longer recognizable in this girl. Like the white Zetsu under your rule. However, in order to subjugate their will it was necessary to sacrifice part of their strength. What you would expect from Orochimaru-sama, Minato smiled. If it weren't for those terrible cracks on their faces, it would be impossible to distinguish them from real Akatsuki. Namikaze caught a disapproving glance from Shin, whose red eyes flashed from under his hood. Sasuke, the last of the 5 destined to rule the new world, turned his gaze to where the regrouped shinobi forces were fighting back against the white Zetsu and Akatsuki. Red lights flashed in the Uchiha's eyes, and he saw one of the Akatsuki fly back from a powerful kick, knocking down his white allies. So much time has passed, but I couldn't help but recognize you. So you survived after all, Obito, Guy muttered, taking a defiant fighting stance as he rose to his feet. What happened to you and how did you end up in Akatsuki? Have you really forgotten everything that was dear to you? The man with the disfigured face did not answer. Standing up, he directed an unkind look at the 6th Hokage, after which the Sharingan in Akatsuki's eye spun, and the ninja disappeared into a spatial funnel, emerging from it behind Might. He managed to jump away only thanks to his speed and well-developed reaction. Otherwise, the green beast of Konoha would have been impaled on the sharp branches that protruded from Obito's hand. Jumping back with a spectacular flip, Guy again stood in a fighting stance and frowned. The power of the first. So you too, said the Hokage, remembering Danzo. Why does it always go to bad people? Shinra Tensei. Might heard someone's voice and immediately hurried to retreat again. A skinny red-haired man with a Rinnegan, moving with the help of a 3-legged structure, used one of the most formidable jutsu of these eyes. Although not at its full strength, and all ninja within a radius of 15 meters were either slammed into the ground by the force of the gravitational field or were thrown back telekinetic wave in different directions. Guy himself barely managed to get out of the field of action of the technique and, looking back while still jumping, saw that the technique had created a crater with many bodies around Akatsuki. My affairs are bad. 2 at once. However, you guys ran into the wrong Kage. The power of youth flows in my veins. Stated the Hokage, landing and concentrating chakra in his body. 6th gate. Gate of Insight. Open up. A new gigantic wave, trying to wash away the shinobi approaching Kisame, was stopped by a wall of golden sand that grew in front of the villain, when a man in black, one of whose hands was also created from golden grains of sand, appeared to protect his army. This was the fourth Kazekage himself. And, apparently, Kisame also could not help but recognize the one with whom he fought shortly before his death. The blue-skinned big man bared his sharp shark teeth. Along with the small cracks all over his face, he looked even more creepy. He looked appreciatively at the Kazekage's artificial hand, as if remembering that there was a special story associated with it, to which he was related. "You definitely won't bite this one," the man retorted a sharp remark, not forgetting how exactly the Nuke-Nin of the Hidden Mist village deprived him of his hand. "I will avenge my son." After the water spread in all directions, Raza, with a movement of his hands, pulled the golden sand towards himself, creating a cocoon from it that protected him from the poison Sanbon of Sasori, who, upon seeing the Kazekage, could not deny himself the pleasure of fighting him. "Sasori, you were a Suna shinobi, so in a sense I am responsible for all your crimes," the fourth grinned. But the puppeteer was not in the mood to participate in the dialogue, or rather, the technique did not provide for this, so he chose to attack again, pointing his palm at the head of Sunagakure, from which a small tube emerged, the barrel of a flamethrower. "Enough!" The fourth Raikage barked, sparkling with a field of blue lightning. The dark-skinned man grabbed the shaft of the scythe facing him with his hand and, spinning the weapon along with its owner around himself, threw them both at another Akatsuki, who, apparently, was Heiden's partner in life. If the summoned dead had loosened their tongues, not only the priest of Jashin would have uttered curses about what happened. Element of dust. Atomic fission. The old man groaned, floating in the air, appearing right in front of Deidara and putting his palms out in front of him. The next moment, someone's arms grabbed Deidara, and when his bird disappeared into a sparkling cube that turned the Nukanin's creation into dust, Akatsuki and his savior, Konan, successfully landed. "You won't even say thank you to her?" The third Tsuchikage grinned, also not knowing that the enemy's muteness does not extend only to the names of the techniques. The explosion lover's hand disappeared into the clay pouch, and the next moment the old man had to quickly fly to the side as several clay birds with lethal explosive charges flew towards him. "What was to be expected?" Zetsu muttered, also noticing that thanks to the Kage's efforts, the enemy army had launched a counteroffensive. "Orochimaru, I remember you promised me the most interesting things for later." "Everything has its time," Orochimaru hissed, knowing that the technique was not ready yet. Insidious sparkles sparkled in her light lavender eyes with a snake-like pupil barely visible on them. "My equipment will be ready just in time, they will be completely exhausted." Sasuke glanced sideways at the two creators of this truly impressive army. However, not with respect, but with some contempt. Years of service under Danzo had taught him that he should always do the dirty work himself. Now, when such a battle was unfolding in front of the tree, and they were holed up here, he felt that this was wrong. In addition, among the resurrected Akatsuki were those with whom the Uchiha had fought in the past. He remembered how the last mission of Team Kakashi with the usual composition ended. Then in Takigakure they suffered a terrible defeat at the hands of some whom Orochimaru returned to this world with a mysterious resurrection technique, among them only Itachi was missing. The Uchiha had already heard from Zetsu about how the Akatsuki disappeared. If the criminals had not destroyed each other, it is difficult to imagine how much more they could have done in this world. However, Zetsu alone, who organized some kind of new world war, had already made it clear what the members of the organization were capable of. The cold gaze of Danzo's former follower rushed to where Guy, engulfed in a green aura, confronted the dark-haired Uchiha with spatial techniques. Sasuke grinned, thinking that if the puppet Orochimaru could not cope with the Hokage, then he would deal with him personally, avenging the death of the head of the root. "Are you thinking about something, Sasuke-san?" Minato asked in his usual cheerful manner. "Yes. I think this has all gone on too long," he said coldly, his eyes flashing. "Patience, Sasuke-kun," Orochimaru hissed through Hinata's lips. "We'll leave revenge for later." The Uchiha nodded reluctantly and again turned his gaze to the battlefield, teeming with white Zetsu, who, emerging from the ground, replenished the ranks, preventing the Akatsuki army from thinning out. Guy gritted his teeth as a wave of telekinetic energy swept him away for the second time, throwing him back. The power of the gate so far protected him from damage, but the sensations were still not pleasant. The rest of the Kage, like him, continued to fight the immortal members of the criminal organization. The only weapons that could deal with them forever were sealing techniques. But before sealing the enemy, it was necessary to weaken him. And if it was possible to do this, then there was not always someone nearby who could finish off the resurrected shinobi with the help of Fuinjutsu. Guy's enemies were some of the most formidable opponents he had to face. Perhaps even Danzo could lose to them in a fair fight. The red-haired shinobi demonstrated terrifying jutsu that controlled gravity. He could literally pull out souls. He several times summoned the most dangerous creatures that Guy could barely deal with, and finally, he used weapons that science had not yet invented. Obito also exceeded the green beast's expectations. In addition to many fire and earth techniques, he mastered several wood ones. And spatial jutsu and techniques that made him intangible practically deprived Guy of the chance to inflict any damage on his former comrade. Another crater formed on the battlefield, at the bottom of which lay his defeated comrades, the White Zetsu, whom the Akatsuki, apparently, were not afraid to hit with their techniques. Surrounded by several dead samurai lay the brave General Mifune, alive only due to his great willpower. The man raised his head with difficulty and looked up at Nagato towering in front of him, who was in a homemade device for moving with 3 legs. How could Akatsuki, as skinny as a skeleton, have so much power? Or is it because of the cursed eyes that gave him incredible power? He muttered some kind of curse, and Pain, noticing that the enemy was still alive, raised his hand, causing him to soar into the air directly in front of him. He silently stared with his violet eyes into the face of the brave samurai. The next moment, Nagato's palm fell on Mifune's armor in the chest area. Akatsuki's hand glowed and sucked the soul out of the enemy, instantly causing him to hang lifelessly like a rag doll. A moment later, he fell to the ground next to his comrades. The sound with which the weapon usually cut the air made Might, who had no time to do anything, raise his head. He saw a man in an Akatsuki cloak appear from a spatial vortex above and throw a huge shuriken at the Hokage. Obito made a seal, and one shuriken turned into a whole cloud of deadly weapons. The kunai and techniques of the brave shinobi immediately flew at the Uchiha, but he disappeared again into the spatial vortex, leaving Guy to deal with the rain from edged weapons. Morning Peacock! Sixth exclaimed, deciding not to dodge, but to parry the weapon flying at him so quickly that his fists lit up with lights flashing brightly in the air. The unharmed Hokage quickly jumped to the side as Pain pointed his hand at him and projectiles like small missiles flew out of the villain's sleeve. True, this number did not come out, because the enemy's eyes sparkled ominously, and the red-haired man said, "Divine attraction." Guy was torn away from the place where he landed, and an unknown force carried him straight towards the charges. However, he was not at a loss, having conceived a crazy but effective plan. Realizing that, despite being pulled towards the enemy, he was still able to control his movements, Guy turned around in the air and sent the projectiles back with a kick barely perceptible to the naked eye. The power of the gate made it possible to do amazing things, for example, strike so quickly that the missiles would not yet have time to explode. After they flew back, Nagato disappeared in a series of explosions, and an unknown force stopped carrying him towards the enemy. Landing on his feet, he found Obito appearing from the side, who decided to switch to close-range combat and again try to impale Guy on sharp branches. The Hokage was faster. He was going to incapacitate his opponent with one powerful blow, but at that moment, when the green beast was very close, his enemy became intangible, and the shinobi simply passed through him. Guy was forced to perform not the first acrobatic maneuver that day in order not to fall. He walked a few steps on his hands and then stood up again. To Might's surprise, Pain, who had been blown to smithereens, was already recovering, forming into a solid figure from many small pieces of paper. "Orochimaru. You and your resurrection technique," muttered the already pretty exhausted Hokage. This fight had already lasted much longer than the fight with Danzo. Moreover, at that time the sixth could rely on the support of his faithful comrade Kakashi, but now everyone who tried to help him resist Akatsuki did not last long. Guy had not yet opened the seventh gate, as if he knew that this was not the worst that today's battle would force him to face. Obito turned around, looking at Guy and thinking about what the resurrection technique allowed him to think about, how to finish off the enemy as quickly as possible. Finally, a new plan came to his mind, and the shinobi, making a series of seals, slammed his palm onto the ground, causing many stone peaks extending from the ground to rush towards Guy. At the most crucial moment, when he decided to destroy the equipment with the power of his blows, the green cover went out and the sixth strength left him. He could barely stand on his feet and, seeing the deadly jutsu approaching, realized that it was too long and too late to open the seventh gate. "Heavenly rotation!" exclaimed the young shinobi in white, landing right in front of Guy and blocking him with himself. Starting to spin quickly, Niji, and it was he, formed a field of chakra that broke all the stone stakes that threatened their safety. "Meet tank!" was heard the cry of Choji, who, rolling in the form of a huge kolobok from the crowd of white Zetsu, demolished the rest of the peaks, and Obito, who did not expect such a sudden intervention in their battle. Flying back, the man in the Akatsuki cloak came straight to Lee, who, as if according to a pre-prepared plan, was exactly where he needed to be. "Konoha Vortex!" he exclaimed, sending Obito flying in the opposite direction before he could move or become intangible. The next attack came from above. A cloud of kunai and shuriken rushed towards the villain, pinning him to the ground, and to top it off, Tenten launched a huge spiked core at him, crushing Akatsuki with its weight, which prevented him from using any jutsu, even the power of his eyes. "Shadow sealing technique," said Shikamaru, who appeared next to Guy. He knelt down and made quick seals with his only hand. The next moment, Nara's shadow connected with the victim's shadow. In an instant, Obito's body was enveloped in darkness, into which he disappeared, forever imprinted on the earth in the form of a shadow that would never disappear. The spiked ball hit the hard, uneven ground and rolled away, crushing the white Zetsu and revealing a black flat silhouette that followed the contours of Obito. Nara sighed in relief. "Looks like we're just in time. Even the Hokage needs our help," he muttered. "Ugh, it wasn't easy to get through to you. These white creatures are everywhere." "You're just in time, guys," Guy smiled. "It's true, I couldn't have done it without you. Power. Don't say that it's all the power of youth that sent us to save you," Niji said, transferring the activated Byakugan to the second Akatsuki. "We need to deal with him first." The eyes of everyone present turned to Pain, who had fully recovered from his injuries. Niji strained his Byakugan to get a good look at the enemy with unusual eyes. "He is very strong. And he has an endless supply of strength and chakra, like all the other Akatsuki," he reported. It seems the other Kage have also succeeded in fighting their enemies. The Kazekage is already breaking through to the tree." The Hokage nodded. The student, as always, was collected and entirely devoted to his work, protecting his comrades and identifying the enemy's weak points. In the current situation, the intelligence that the Byakugan could provide was very useful. Like Shikamaru's strategic thinking, Tenten's accuracy, Lee's speed and Choji's strength. "Fine. What else? Do you see Orochimaru?" Might asked. "If we deal with him after we finish with this non-human, there will be fewer surprises on the battlefield." "Orochimaru," Niji muttered, turning his gaze to the tree, expecting to find the main heroes of the occasion behind the hordes of pawns put to waste. Hyuga froze, realizing that he did not believe the eyes that had never deceived him. "Orochimaru is there. This is Hinata." Amazingly persistent people, Zetsu commented on what was happening, because nothing could hide from the gaze of these eyes. Are you ready, Orochimaru? The girl nodded, licking her lips. I asked you for something for a reason, Zetsu-sama. And I needed to use the tree to remove all the restrictions that prevented me from returning her. But I think you will be pleased with the result, the scientist in Hyuga's body commented on what would happen next. At first I thought about the resurrection of Uchiha Madara. But given what is about to happen, this would hardly surprise you. Her? The black and white guy asked, measuring the scientist with a look that contained anxiety and doubt. The girl's slender fingers began to form familiar seals, and the combination ended with a clap of her hands. I thought that if she returned earlier than expected, it would make you happy. Edo Tensei, she said, and the next moment a single coffin appeared below, moving out of the ground with an ominous roar. The next moment, the lid fell off and crashed to the ground, opening a passage for the guest from the other world into the world of the living. It can't be, Zetsu whispered, not believing his eyes, when the first hand to emerge from the coffin was a hand with graceful feminine fingers ending in long nails painted black. Mother! At that moment the world seemed to stop. White Zetsu and the people froze when a new coffin emerged from the ground, and the first hand to emerge from it was the one with which a woman from a long-forgotten past, brought back to life, grabbed the edge, helping herself to get out. Following the hand, her foot set foot on the ground for the first time in more than a millennium. And then Kaguya herself appeared, dressed in a long white robe with tomo running from the collar down to its center and on the sleeves. She was frighteningly pale, with small cracks, like other resurrected ones, long white hair that went right down to the ground, and two horns protruding from her head. Will it make me happy? You don't even understand what a mistake you made, daring to use this jutsu on my mother, Zetsu said, looking coldly at Orochimaru, from whose face a contented snake-like smile slipped. It seems that the scientist made a huge mistake. But she is free. I did not dare to subjugate her to my will, he said quickly through the lips of a dark-haired girl, looking at the fruit of his technique and again at Zetsu, who was very dissatisfied with his gift. She has an immortal body and endless chakra at her disposal. You couldn't even if you wanted to. Your technique is good for people, but when it comes to resurrecting a god, it is a vile outrage. She is angry. Pray that her wrath does not fall on you, answered the black and white man with renegades in his eyes. Resurrection of God? What's going on here? Is this the same mother he was talking about? Sasuke thought, frowning. Kaguya's appearance made him tense. Something told him that Zetsu's words could not be said just like that. Has the goddess herself really risen from the dead? Kaguya looked up. A fierce white fire flashed in her eyes, and blood vessels bulged under her skin, making it clear that Otsutsuki wielded the Byakugan. Looking at the army, her lips, painted dark red, curled contemptuously. The goddess's palm with long black nails at the fingertips clenched into a fist, and the next moment she hit the air in front of her. The Alliance army shuddered from many giant fists that appeared right in the air from the most powerful chakra that light had ever seen, which swept it away almost completely at once, along with the white Zetsu, who were hit. The observers guarding the great tree froze in place at the demonstration of the power of this terrible woman. Orochimaru wondered what Otsutsuki's true power might be if the resurrection technique limited some of its capabilities. With one blow. Almost everyone, Sasuke whispered in shock. Are you jealous, Sasuke-san? Minato grinned, although he himself was unable to take his eyes off the terrible and bewitching sight. This is where the evolution of shinobi began, Shin mused, his Sharingan locked on Kaguya, who had just created something much more impressive than the army of identical white creatures summoned by Zetsu. The ground, dotted with a bunch of craters, on which the blows of giant translucent fists fell, was littered with bodies. Those who were still able to move tried to get up, and at that moment Kaguya, who had not fully expressed her anger, decided to finish them off. Her white hair began to move as if alive, and the next moment a multitude of snow-white needles, like a hail that darkened the sky, fell on the victims of her previous attack, piercing the unlucky ones and chaining them, writhing in agony, to the ground. Those who were further away, and saw how their comrades died one after another, were ready to flee, forgetting about the duty of shinobi and why they came to the land of iron. But someone else believed in the mission they had to accomplish, and was not going to back down in the face of impending death. Earth release, massive stone wall. The Tsuchikage and the shinobi loyal to him stepped forward, simultaneously making seals and placing their hands on the ground. With a roar, the ground shook, splitting, and a wall of solid stone, so high and thick, created by a whole crowd of shinobi from several layers, fenced off the surviving troops from the fire. It was strengthened by the golden sand of the Kazekage, who spent a whole lot of chakra so that projectiles, unknown to what they were capable of, would not penetrate the barrier. "Are you okay?" Guy asked, looking back at the young shinobi who had given him great help in the last battle. "This is something terrible," Shikamaru muttered, rising from the ground. Fortunately, he and the rest of the heroes who fought alongside the 6th Hokage against Akatsuki were only hit by the shock wave. "How to fight this?" "We'll take care of this," the Raikage said, appearing nearby and looking at Guy. "This is a battle of the strongest, just for us, Kage." "May the power of youth protect us," Guy agreed and, looking back at the students, nodded encouragingly to them. "Everything will be fine. We will endure." Never before had the Kage fought side by side. Zetsu, who was watching from his place in the field of view, was the first to see how 4 brave heroes jumped over the wall and headed towards Kaguya. Guy, dressed in green tights, Raza in black robes, Hei, who wore a white short-sleeved cloak fluttering in the wind, and Inoki, an old man floating in the air. For Kage dared to oppose their mother, he muttered. "So silly." The black and white creature's gaze turned to the horizon, where reinforcements of the Alliance army suddenly appeared. These eyes allowed him to see almost everything, and Zetsu easily recognized one of those who led the shinobi who came to help. "Itachi," he said. Sasuke winced at the mention of his brother's name. "What happened, Zetsu-sama? Are we in trouble?" Minato hastened to clarify. "It seems it's time for you to join the fight. Meet our guests," the black and white creature responded, grinning. "No one will interfere with the execution of our plan. The tree will come to life, and with it the mother will regain her living body and strength, which has no equal in the world. Forward!" Itachi commanded, after which the army of Amigakure shinobi rushed to help the combined forces of the 4 villages of shinobi and samurai. "They listen to you," Kimiko muttered, slightly surprised. "But they are loyal to pain." The Uchiha grinned, glancing at the scale of destruction on the battlefield. Instead of an Akatsuki cloak, he wore a regular brown robe, worn over the Konoha combat uniform that the shinobi had once worn. "It seems that the shinobi has decided to bring back a piece of the long-forgotten past. They are loyal to me," he answered. "And although pain is dead, Amigakure is stronger than ever. Under my command as their Kage." "A lot has happened in this short time," Naruto scratched the back of his head. Even he was a little confused. Too much has happened lately, and even the Joker had a hard time sorting out the 3 main questions: what, how and why. "What's going on here?" Mikoto whispered, looking at how the surviving Alliance army and the Rain Ninja who joined them were fighting back something that was many times greater than the strength of the Akatsuki. "I don't know, but we better intervene," Itachi muttered, giving her a quick glance. "And the sooner the better." "How noble, Itachi-kun," someone hissed, appearing in a yellow flash along with 3 other shinobi. It was Hinata, or rather, her body, occupied by the evil scientist, whose voice Naruto recognized from the first moment. "And I thought he'd sit back and watch how valiantly your people fight." At the sight of the girl, Uzumaki shuddered. What she was now did not fit in with who Hyuga had been before. even before Naruto ceased to be part of Konoha. A quiet and modest girl turned into a monster. Her skin was pale, an uncharacteristic ominous smile played on her lips, and serpentine vertical pupils were visible in her light eyes. The four shinobi standing in front of each other met their gazes. Some of them had too much to do. In particular, the two brothers, as soon as they saw each other, immediately became serious. The two Uchiha's intense gazes met, as if no one and nothing else existed. "Itachi," Sasuke muttered, reaching for the tanto. "I've wanted to find you and finish you off personally for so long. I will finally get my revenge on you." "Sasuke, you're with them too," Mikoto said in a trembling voice. Now she knew the whole truth, so the fact that Sasuke remained on the enemy side even after the death of his master, Danzo, hurt her even more. She turned her gaze to the man in the cloak, whose face was partially hidden by the hood, but still recognized him as the killer of the third Hokage, with whom she had already fought several years ago. "You," she squeezed out, and two red lights stared at her from under the hood. "Girl. This time, I'll take your Sharingan for myself," he muttered coldly in a threatening tone. "Which is to be expected. You and Orochimaru are at the same time," Naruto said, looking at Sasuke with a contemptuous look. "You have fallen below nowhere." But then he saw a fair-haired young man about his age in a white cloak. Is this the same mysterious savior of the Uchiha? So similar to the fourth Hokage? "Hello Naruto," Minato smiled. "Show respect to Mr. Orochimaru, otherwise this will end badly." "Bad for you," the Joker said, violet eyes flashing. "Who are you anyway?" "My name is Minato Namikaze." "It seems I'm your father," the golden-haired ninja grinned. "Or rather, I was created in the image and likeness of the one who was your father." Naruto winced. So who was this mysterious guy really? "And, to tell the truth, I was created precisely in order to defeat you in a fight. Orochimaru-sama, allow me to take my leave. The mission you have entrusted to me must be completed immediately. I don't want to miss all the fun." He looked at the dark-haired girl and, waiting for a nod, quickly threw a kunai with two prongs on either side of the main blade at Naruto. It was too fast. Although Naruto was prepared for a surprise attack, the enemy's movement was surprisingly unpredictable. One minute he was having a casual conversation with a naive smile on his lips, and now he's going on the offensive. Joker barely had time to dodge, and the throwing weapon only struck his shoulder, tearing his purple cloak and leaving a small cut on his skin, but that was enough. The next moment he disappeared in a yellow flash, without really having time to understand anything. And the young copy of the fourth Hokage disappeared after him, waving one last time to his comrades and receiving no answer. "Naruto!" Kimiko exclaimed as the Joker disappeared as if he had never been there. "There are fewer of us left," Orochimaru hissed contentedly, confident in the victory of his best experiment. "Kimiko, daughter of the copy ninja. I managed to conduct some experiments. I will really need your body." "Don't even think about it," Mikoto muttered, blocking her white-haired friend. "You will pay for Hinata. And you won't get anyone else. Shin. Deal with her," the scientist hissed, looking at the Uchiha with displeasure. The man in the cloak nodded, grinning contentedly. It seemed like she was the one he really wanted to fight with. "I'll finish this right here and now," the girl said decisively, her Sharingan lighting up in her eyes. Snatching a kunai, she rushed towards the enemy, but a small white creature with a single eye suddenly jumped out of the sleeve of his cloak, and both were immediately sucked into a spatial vortex. Less and less, Orochimaru grinned, realizing that the brothers were determined to fight each other. He looked at Kimiko. "The last of the Hatake clan. It's a shame your story was so short." The scientist in Hyuga's body took a fighting stance, and the next moment the blood vessels leading to his eyes swelled. The Byakugan was activated. The white-haired Kunoichi also took a fighting stance, her palms glowing with dark chakra. It's just beginning, she objected, rushing to the attack. At the same moment, Sasuke took off and flew at Itachi, armed with a deadly tanto. The brother had to jump back and draw a kunai to parry the quick and surprisingly well-aimed attacks. It seemed like his brother was really strong, and giving him a head start would be a stupid decision. They came together as the two weapons collided with each other, clanking loudly and sending out a shower of bright sparks. Two pairs of red eyes stared at each other. "You will pay for everything you've done," the younger Uchiha muttered hatefully, remembering that in the last battle with Naruto he had never completed the job, and deciding that this time he would give it his all. A yellow flash spat out the blonde shinobi, who, clutching his wounded shoulder, turned over in the air, hearing how somewhere nearby, the blade that appeared with him was flying, whistling through the air. As soon as he stabbed into the grass, a nimble enemy appeared from a new flash, and a new blow made Naruto roll head over heels on the ground, raising clouds of dust. Clearing his throat and standing up, the Uzumaki in a purple leather cloak fixed his gaze on the enemy, proudly looking at him from a distance of 5 meters. Minato had a carefree smile on his face as always. And blue naive sparkles burned in her eyes. Naruto sighed, looking around, realizing that he knew where the enemy had moved them. This was a historical place where the legendary first Hokage and Uchiha Madara once fought. Now the two young opponents were not far from the place where a whole body of water was rushing down with a roar. On either side of the waterfall towered majestic stone sculptures of shinobi of the past, standing opposite each other with folded seals of concentration. It's funny, it was from this position, as they taught at the academy, that a fair fight began. It was a kind of tribute to the enemy, accepting him as an equal. In reality, everything happened differently, and this was clearly visible in the example of their battle that had just begun. The Uzumaki assessed the distance to the cliff, wondering what his chances were of throwing his enemy down where the river continued from the waterfall. He himself should have been careful. Taking into account the environment during a fight, as experience had taught him, was also vital to victory. The young Namikaze threw the kunai into the air, where the blade with one main blade and two additional blades on the sides turned beautifully, and caught it with his hand. Such ostentation in front of someone who himself had dexterous hands enough to perform incredible tricks with cards evoked voices in the head of the former Jinchuriki, insistently demanding to put this upstart in his place. Show off. Well, it's our turn to surprise. Even though he looks like the one in whose image he was created, he is not the father. I'll finish this guy. And I'll do it quickly. Not bad, the Joker grinned, wiping his lip that was broken during the fall. Really fast as lightning. You disappointed me, Naruto-kun. Orochimaru-sama said that at one time Mr. Danzo had big plans for you. The guy threw the kunai again. Not even a minute has passed, and I've already managed to give you a hard time. Is this what fathers do when their kids misbehave? The Uzumaki shuddered. His interlocutor had a peculiar humor. Fathers? Who does this test tube guy think he is? I will gladly cut his throat, let him choke on his laughs when he chokes on blood. You're fast, but inattentive, said the shinobi, flashing his violet eyes. A barely perceptible movement, and a card fell from the sleeve of the leather cloak into the hand with which the young man had just wiped away the blood. I knew that surprises would await me. And prepared for this. So, putting yourself under attack was your plan? Asked young Namikaze, throwing his weapon for the last time and catching it by the tip of the blade. Don't get too carried away, otherwise everything will end faster than even I would like. With these words, he threw the weapon forward, making several seals. Multiple shadow kunai. Wild dance of the thunder god. Naruto didn't even have time to blink before the cloud of bladed weapons flying towards him sparkled with yellow lightning. It was his opponent, quickly moving in space from one blade to another, who decided where to attack from. However, he was so fast that from the outside it would seem that Minato would have attacked from many points at once. Now it's my turn, Naruto grinned, looking at the card in his hand. I haven't shown tricks to anyone for a long time. This one I just came up with thanks to you. With a snap of his finger, the former Jinchuriki sent the card flying. Having flown up, she turned over several times in the air and fell on the grass, where there was no one else. Naruto was gone. A yellow tornado of lightning swept across the place where he had just stood. And when the danger had passed, Uzumaki reappeared, flashing not as brightly as the owner of the copied technique, but in purple due to the fact that the cloak colored the lightning exactly in this shade. So that's how it works, he muttered, twirling the card in his hand and looking at Minato, who reappeared on the other side. Namikaze's breathing was rapid. It seems that he slightly overestimated his strength, deciding that he would kill Naruto with the first blow. But underestimating the Joker was a big mistake. You copied my technique. And on top of that, I was able to immediately use it. This is not fair. The young copy of the fourth Hokage was indignant, pointing a finger at Naruto. Who said that I am for honesty in battle? This is the nature of Mito Uzumaki's technique, the first jutsu I learned. When you used Thunder God Flight against me to transport here, I prepared in advance to seal the technique into this card. So you set yourself up, buddy, the former Jinchuriki responded. The Joker's cold expression changed and a wicked smile appeared on his lips. He truly enjoyed the disappointment that Minato's emotional clone didn't even try to hide. And this works well, Naruto noted. A new brilliant plan matured in his head. I'll piss him off, then the advantage in the battle will be on my side. You know, I didn't know my father. But, I'm sure, if Orochimaru had resurrected him, he would have been more useful. He turned to his interlocutor with a mockery, forcing him to cast an indignant glance at his son. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Minato pulled himself together with an effort of will. It seems the Joker's plan has failed. Namikaze again armed himself with a kunai and threw it straight at his enemy. Naruto was about to dodge at the last moment, otherwise the weapon would have pierced his forehead, but the enemy planned a more complex attack. The kunai had not yet reached its target when suddenly Minato again moved to his blade, suddenly appearing right in front of Joker and, turning in the air, rewarded him with a kick, sending him flying back. Then the fair-haired young man in a white cloak again threw the weapon after the enemy and again disappeared in a flash. His opponent, who continued to fly backward, not expecting a second blow after the first, barely had time to put up his hands, on which Minato made a long, but shallow scratch with a cutting blow. Then a knee to the stomach sent Joker back a few meters, and the kunai rushed after him again. He uses his speed as an advantage and doesn't give me a chance to fight back. Flashed through his head. No, his plan is different, Joker's own voice sharply interrupted him, and he heard the approaching roar of water rushing into the abyss. He realized that the enemy was pushing him towards the cliff. Dipping his hand into the inner pocket of his cloak, Naruto pulled out a card and, throwing it back, made a seal of concentration. Earth element, stone wall. The next moment, a barrier of stone appeared right behind him, into which Naruto crashed with his back, stopping his flight. He slid down the wall just in time as Minato reappeared from the spatial technique, preparing a new gift for his enemy in his hand. Rasengan. The young man exclaimed, hitting the stone wall with a rotating blue sphere, from the impact of which it was instantly smashed into small pebbles. However, the enemy did not expect such a turn of events, so he flew a few more meters by inertia and stopped only at the cliff. Naruto, having managed to get up and arm himself with a new card with a technique sealed in it, realized that this was the most convenient moment to attack. Wind release, great air storm. Filling his lungs with air charged with chakra, he caused a powerful hurricane, leaving the enemy no chance to stay in place. Minato stabbed his kunai into the ground at the last moment, giving him a few more seconds. Then, under the force of the wind blowing towards him, his legs were torn off the ground. A moment later, the kunai was torn out of the ground, and the blonde shinobi, along with his weapon, flew into the abyss. Naruto sighed as he slowly walked towards the cliff. A fall from such a height into the water could hardly kill the enemy. But he made every effort to ensure that he was powerfully hit at least once against the rocks on the opposite side of the gorge above the river. Looking down, he shuddered when he saw something he never expected to see. Sitting on the churned surface of the river, Minato, unharmed, was covered in a blanket of orange-red chakra. His body began to change, losing his human qualities, and soon a familiar roar was heard over the Valley of the End. Which could only belong to what the Joker left in the distant past, the nine-tailed fox. The creature with a single eye disappeared again into the dimensional vortex, leaving the two shinobi on the majestic bridge leading to the majestic castle of the Land of Iron, now the almost empty abode of the samurai. "Take me back," Mikoto said coldly, glaring at the red eyes of the man in the black cloak. However, the tree visible in the distance, with its top reaching into the very skies, indicated that they were not so far from the place where the largest battle in shinobi history was unfolding. "Well, I do not. I don't want to be left without your Sharingan again," the enemy responded, throwing off his hood and appearing before the enemy in his true form. The girl saw a pale face, disfigured by a terrible scar around the eye, which seemed to be held open by 8 metal staples right in the flesh. This man was completely bald, and additional eyeballs with a red iris and 3 tomo around the pupils were implanted directly into his head, in places where they were not naturally supposed to be. The most terrible thing was that these eyes moved, being living elements of the villain's body. From under the sleeve of his cloak, when Shin revealed his face to her, his only, left, hand appeared, also full of many eyes transplanted into it, which once belonged to the Uchiha clan. Mikoto shuddered, for the scenes of her last meeting with the villain flashed very vividly in her memory. She again saw the gloomy corridor of the Hokage residence, the bodies of Anbu crucified with scalpels on the wall, a broken window and a silhouette against the background of lightning flashing in the dark sky. "I also remember our first meeting," he grinned, understanding what she was thinking. "Then Danzo tasked me with killing the third Hokage. You appeared there at such an unfortunate moment, witnessing what happened. He stopped me from finishing you off because he considered you too valuable. Now no one will stop us. Then Kakashi-sensei came to my rescue. And then Danzo appeared, after which this man immediately disappeared," the brunette recalled. On the day Hiruzen Sarutobi died, the man in the cloak mentioned that the new Sharingan allowed him to evolve. He seemed to be turned on by the idea of becoming stronger. However, this explained all the transformations that happened to his body. "What is your name?" she said. "My name is Shin Uchiha. And I am the future of the Uchiha clan." He introduced himself and again repeated the phrase that he had uttered years ago. Rather, his past, judging by how many eyes of the dead you transplanted into your body, the Uchiha noted, correctly guessing where how many Sharingans came from her old enemy. "You're right, no one will stop us. We've already made Danzo pay for what he did. Now I will avenge the death of the third Hokage." The Sharingan spun in the enemy's eyes, taking on a new shape, a ball and 3 curved lines coming out of it. "Revenge. Sasuke is obsessed with it too," Shin muttered. "And it was this path that brought him to us. You are all stepping on the same rake. And I choose my own path, learning from the mistakes of the past. So why do you think I'm better than you? You don't know anything about Sasuke." Mikoto exclaimed unexpectedly sharply for herself. Of course, she didn't know for sure how much Shin knew about the Uchiha's life. The fact that he was Danzo's secret servant raised the possibility that he knew almost every detail of both Sasuke's and her own pasts. But Mikoto believed that the Sasuke she remembered as part of Kakashi's team was still alive. And the fact that the villain once again denigrated Sasuke's name by leading the Uchiha to the wrong path outraged her, making her heart beat faster. The enemy's face was distorted by an eerie smile. Is he dear to you, despite everything he has done? Who are you to care about him so much? Is it really his sister? The opponent's cold, imperturbable tone changed to mocking. Lightning release, double thunder panther. The girl quickly made seals and put her hands in front of her. From her palms, sparkling with blue lightning, 2 discharges burst out, which, having acquired 2 large cats, rushed towards the enemy. Shin reacted quickly enough to come up with a rescue plan. He jumped back, holding his only hand out in front of him. From the sleeve of his cloak, many scalpels charged with chakra flew out, which stuck into the floor, forming a network connected by barely visible bluish threads. The panthers rushing across the bridge were unable to overcome this obstacle, and, as soon as they stepped into the chakra network, they dissolved, flashing violently with lightning that had lost its shape. The villain landed again. The Mangekyo Sharingan flashed in his eyes, and the scalpels returned to him, connecting with each other and forming a second hand. The girl decisively rushed forward, armed with 2 kunai. Throwing the weapon forward, she formed seals, causing both projectiles to become saturated with electricity and connect to each other with a thread sparkling with lightning. Lightning release, chain reaction. This time Shin did not retreat, but rather rushed forward. Deftly jumping over a thread of lightning that could paralyze him with its current force, he jumped towards the Uchiha, swinging his artificial arm. She pulled back, armed herself with kunai again and took a defensive position. Barely resisting a powerful blow from scalpels, Mikoto was still able to stop the enemy, who almost reached her face. The bladed fingers flashed dangerously close to her eyes, and then the Uchiha rewarded the enemy with a kick in the stomach, forcing him to ride 2 meters back on his feet. Mangekyo flashed again in the eyes of the enemy, and his hand again turned into a cloud of scalpels, which, spinning in the air, took the form of a huge shuriken, obeying the will of the owner. He pointed the weapon towards the Uchiha, intending to cut her in half. Showing miracles of flexibility, she leaned back, staying on her feet and at the same time letting the whistling black shuriken pass over her. Straightening up and thinking that the threat was behind her, Mikoto looked back only when the whistle with which the blades cut the air became louder again. The weapon was returning, about to attack her from behind. You can't run away from my weapon, it will still overtake you sooner or later, Shin chuckled. So this is the power of his eyes? He controls objects at a distance, flashed through her head. Realizing that she would not have time to dodge again, Mikoto formed her seals with lightning speed to use one of her techniques. Lightning release, electric waltz, she said, causing an arc of electrical discharges to shield her from the shuriken. Having crashed into the barrier, it disintegrated into many scalpels, thrown into the air by the force of electricity. Confident that the weapon had lost its shape, the connection between its elements had been destroyed, and the danger was left behind, Mikoto turned to face the enemy, who stood and watched her actions with mockery. It looks like you didn't understand anything, he said, looking at her with feigned pity. The next moment, instead of hitting the bridge, the blades again spun in the air and flew towards her, coming in from the side. What? Again? She thought, but it was already too late. Even the Uchiha's Sharingan was unable to help her. An unknown force swept her sideways, pinning her to a column rising on the side of the bridge, and scalpels, piercing her skin and clothes, pinned her to it. If the scalpels attacked her all at once, Mikoto would not be able to recover from such a blow, but Shin was not going to kill her so easily. Therefore, following his will, they pierced her wrists, causing hellish pain, and in other places they stuck around the perimeter of her body, leaving minor cuts here and there and nailing her clothes so that the girl could not escape. Stupid girl, Shin sighed, walking up to her and standing opposite her. He looked at her with contempt. You are still too young to compete with me in strength. He raised his hand and reached for her eyes. At the same time, the Sharingans on his hand all stared as one at the girl trapped. That's all, your eyes will help me evolve. The Sharingan was spinning in Mikoto's eyes, but that didn't stop Shin. Then her Sharingan changed shape, turning into an 8-pointed red star on a black background. Mangekyo. As I expected, you are a very valuable specimen. It's no use, genjutsu won't work on me. So many Sharingans provide me with complete immunity to genjutsu, he muttered, continuing to reach for her eyes with the fingers of his left hand. Suddenly Shin froze. Bloody tears rolled down Mikoto's cheeks. It's not just genjutsu. This is a nightmare coming true, she said, already with full confidence that their fight was over. A nightmare coming true? I've never heard of such a technique. But I can still save myself, he thought, deciding to call for help a white creature that could teleport him away to a safe place, and remembering the possibility of using his Izanagi. But the Uchiha had foreseen all options. When a white creature with a single eye cursed on the owner's shoulder, his hand, which had ceased to obey his will, grabbed him and squeezed him with all his might. What? Is my body being controlled? Remembering the illusion-turned reality she had prepared for Sei, Mikoto dismissed this option. Her opponent didn't deserve to be burned in the sun's rays. The thought that even the Joker would not have come up with anything so cruel came to her at the very last moment. The enemy, who did not understand anything, realized that he was in an illusory world by the fact that everything around him had become somehow blurry and insignificant. Now he was worried about the changes happening to his own body. The first thing Shin looked at was his own hand. And when he did this, he shuddered with something he had never experienced before, horror. Instead of pupils on the Sharingan, small hieroglyphs were visible in his hand, the same as on the explosive seals used by shinobi. Shin screamed deafeningly loudly as the Sharingans on his body began to burst one after another. He had always been a killer, a hunter pursuing his prey, and now he had become the victim. And who? A young dark-haired girl whose eyes I've almost added to my collection? The terrible pain, intensifying every time another eyeball burst, made the pseudo-Uchiha speechless. He shouted something inarticulate, stepping back. When the shinobi rested his back against the opposite column, Mikoto saw how his real eyes were the last to burst. And the next moment, the last explosive seal, which was tattooed in the illusion on the back of his head, went off. The villain's head exploded like a watermelon into which child bandits had stuffed a firecracker, spraying red spray all around. The body collapsed forward, spewing blood onto the surface of the bridge, spreading into an ever larger puddle. You wanted the power of my eyes, choke on it, Mikoto whispered, feeling that she had lost almost all her strength, but knowing that it was time to get out. Fire release, great fireball! Exclaimed the two brothers, exhaling techniques at each other, which collided with each other, blindingly blazing with tongues of flame. Each of the Uchiha tried to overpower the other, breathing out more and more fire and making their sphere of flame even more powerful. But their strengths were equal. Two powerful jutsu fought with each other for some time, after which they dissolved, causing the heated air to tremble, and the brothers to look through it at each other's worried figures. You have grown a lot since our last meeting, Itachi muttered, not expecting that Sasuke's strength had increased so much. However, the younger Uchiha was still just warming up. Furious lights sparkled in his red eyes. I don't care what you think, he muttered coldly, starting to make hand seals. Today I will finally finish you off. Once and for all. Fuinjutsu, fire release, fire whirlwind. The next moment, the former root fighter exhaled a fiery funnel that rushed towards Itachi, growing with every moment and sucking into itself everything that came along the way. Across the fiery hurricane, running black symbols of seals could be seen, flashing every time something like a stone or a small tree fell into the funnel that destroyed everything in front of it. Itachi clenched his teeth, appreciating the scale of the technique his brother had created. He definitely didn't want to get inside an enemy jutsu. When the Uchiha came up with a plan, the crater was already very close. But he had enough time to activate the Mangekyo Sharingan and summon Susanoo, a ghostly giant red-orange skeleton that quickly became covered first in muscle tissue and then in armor. In the hands of the giant who grew up in front of Sasuke, a fiery sword lit up, with which the elder Uchiha met the approaching technique. The firestorm flashed indignantly before being sucked into the weapon in a huge six-fingered hand. The Totsuka sword, whose purpose was to seal everything it touched, coped with its task. Sasuke looked up at the ghostly warrior that Itachi was inside. His face was especially tense. Apparently, he already knew what exactly he saw in front of him. It is impossible that Danzo, his mentor, did not tell the Uchiha about the famous techniques of the Mangekyo Sharingan. "You can't break through this defense," Itachi said from inside Susanoo, looking at his brother coming up with a new plan. "Sasuke, I know how much you want to kill me. I wanted you to become like this so that you could grow up strong." "What are you talking about? You killed our entire family." "Of course, I want to kill you," the younger Uchiha exclaimed. "Yes, it is. But there's a lot you don't know. Danzo used you." Sasuke smirked, looking at his brother like he was an idiot. Even as a child, when he and Itachi were quite close, he did not dare allow himself to do this. "And now you will say that Danzo is absolute evil, right?" He foresaw the further development of their dialogue. Yes, he got the third out of his way. But thanks to this, peace and order reigned in the village for many years. For the sake of peace and order, he ordered me to remove our clan. I was also at his beck and call. "Don't repeat my mistakes," Itachi said. "Believing you was my main mistake in life. I won't allow it anymore," said the younger brother. "You are evil. And the fact that Naruto and Mikoto went against Danzo, and now together with you, proves that they too." He looked at the ghostly giant with a fiery sword in his hand. Itachi was in no hurry to attack, and this was to Sasuke's advantage. He had already figured out how to break through Susanoo's absolute defense. Sasuke's hand reached for his kunai holster, and several shuriken that were in his hand were immediately launched forward. The elder Uchiha looked in bewilderment at the metal stars flying at him, which posed absolutely no threat to Susanoo. What is Sasuke going to do? Itachi's Sharingan followed the seals that Sasuke made in the blink of an eye. Propagate shurikens using shadow technology? Really? But even a cloud of weapons is unlikely to harm him in any way. Reverse print. Sasuke said, extremely pleased that Itachi did not consider the shurikens to be a real threat and did not avoid the attack. The next moment, the first shuriken that crashed into Susanoo's hand exploded into a black sphere that expanded a meter in all directions. A second later, the sphere slammed shut, turning everything inside it into nothing. Thus, the projectile tore off a generous chunk from the ghostly warrior's arm, and Itachi realized that he had made a mistake by underestimating his brother. One after another, the shurikens crashed into the translucent giant, absorbing it part by part. In the end, Itachi had to retreat, jumping from inside Susanoo while it held off the last attacks before disappearing into thin air. The elder brother cursed, noticing that 3 more shuriken were flying after him, just as deadly as those that had broken through his absolute defense. Amaterasu can't handle this. I no longer have time to dodge. I'll have to use Susanoo again, Itachi thought. Summoning the ghostly giant again would have been too expensive in terms of chakra, but in order to save himself, Uchiha had to resort to using Mangekyo again and find himself inside Susanoo's rib box, capable of protecting against one such hit. A red-orange hand made of huge translucent bones grew from Itachi's shoulder, which, by sacrificing itself, helped the Uchiha brush off the shuriken threatening him. The Uchiha stopped running and was able to breathe calmly, realizing that he had dealt with Sasuke's jutsu, which almost drove him into a corner. Sasuke also stood still, gathering his strength. It was not easy to use so many fuinjutsu at once. Surely his chakra reserves were greatly reduced. It seems that the Uchiha had calculated that Itachi would not be able to escape from such a technique, and was now lamenting that he had made a mistake. Summoning technique, taking a breath, Sasuke made several seals and, biting his finger, dripped the blood onto the ground. A black pattern of seals appeared across it, and then a huge bird flew out of a white cloud into the sky, which the younger Uchiha managed to deftly jump on. Flapping its wings, the bird carried Sasuke higher and higher. He's getting ready to use the technique Naruto was talking about, Itachi thought, remembering that Joker had managed to briefly tell him about his own fight with Sasuke. One day, after gaining altitude with the help of his hawk, Sasuke fell from the skies and used Heaven's Fury, a lightning-fast jutsu that shook the very ground. Using the knowledge gained before the battle and assessing his capabilities, the elder Uchiha came to the conclusion that it was better to prevent this technique by shooting down his brother in flight. From the rib box of the translucent red-orange chakra that still protected him, another giant bone arm grew, with what appeared to be 3 giant tomo spinning above it, just like the one seen in the eyes of the Uchiha clan members. Yasaka no Magatama. Stone of 8 slopes. Itachi exclaimed, launching a projectile into the air. Sasuke, who had not expected such a sharp counterattack, did not have time to escape the attack, as a result of which the stone of 8 slopes hit the hawk straight, causing the bird to explode in a cloud of white smoke, and its passenger to fly down. Fuinjutsu, fire release, phoenix wings. The Uchiha exclaimed, and the flames held by the black outlines of the seals in the shape of wings behind Sasuke's back prevented him from falling. Flapping his wings, blazing with fiery flashes, the brunette dived down, arming himself with a tanto as he went. The blade of the weapon sparkled with blue lightning. Chidori blade. I couldn't even imagine how strong you are, Sasuke. How many more tricks do you have up your sleeve? Itachi thought, thinking of what to do. Amaterasu. He exclaimed, causing the air in his brother's path to flare up with black flame. Tom had to demonstrate miracles of dexterity to dodge. The next moment, Sasuke flew at his brother, who was protected by the rib box of the Susanoo in which he was located. At the last moment, the fiery wings behind Sasuke exploded into flames, giving the owner maximum acceleration for the strike. In this regard, when the Uchiha, thrusting his tanto sparkling with lightning forward, flew at Itachi, half of the blade slipped inside, scratching his brother's shoulder. Bright cracks appeared in the place where the tanto pierced Susanoo, along the protection of chakra and translucent ribs. Itachi clenched his teeth, feeling the cut sting from the dying bolts of electricity. Through the red-orange prism, the two brothers' gazes met, and Itachi saw nothing in his brother's eyes other than the thirst for revenge. Sealing into the blade. He muttered, flashing his Sharingan and making seals with one hand. Itachi barely had time to pull back so that the blade of the enemy tanto would not touch him. Before his eyes, Susanoo's chakra began to be sucked into Sasuke's weapon, black patterns crawled along the blade. When the absolute defense was completely absorbed by the enemy, Itachi pulled back, arming himself with several kunai. Having launched them at his brother, he made a seal of concentration. But Sasuke was fast enough to deflect the projectiles to the sides before the explosive seals wrapped around them went off. Holding his weapon to Itachi's throat, Sasuke smirked. You lost, brother. Danzo taught you well, Itachi thought. Realizing that now Sasuke was blinded by victory, and this was the best moment for a counterattack. The Mangekyo Sharingan swirled in his eyes, and the lips of the cornered Uchiha whispered. Tsukuyomi. Kimiko and Orochimaru engaged in fierce hand-to-hand combat. The movements of the scientist in the body of the young Hyuga were coherent, smooth and at the same time surprisingly accurate. Apparently, this was the unique fighting style of the famous Konoha clan, which the villain mastered after moving into Hinata's body, along with everything that she knew and could do during life. Hataka had a hard time. She was not bad at taijutsu, but the enemy, who saw her tenketsu and sought to block them by blocking the flow of her chakra, clearly had an advantage in this situation. Shielding herself from the palm strike with both hands, Kimiko jumped back with a flip and, taking advantage of the fact that she briefly broke away from the scientist, made several seals. Forbidden technique, pitch darkness. The girl said, and the next moment everything around was plunged into darkness. Even Orochimaru's Byakugan was unable to see in the darkness that fell over the site of their battle. Not bad, the scientist grinned, realizing that the battle would be longer and more interesting than he had originally expected. You gave yourself a couple more minutes. But I will still find you, little Kimiko. Straining his eyes and trying to see something, the villain looked around. He opened his mouth slightly and stuck out his tongue, like a snake, trying to smell the prey. The slightest rustles suggested that Hatake was meandering somewhere nearby, calculating how to strike so that the enemy did not have time to dodge. Forbidden technique, touch of darkness, was heard from behind. The darkness dissipated, and the next moment it turned out that the white-haired girl's palm, saturated with a cloud of black chakra, was sticking out of Orochimaru's chest. The scientist hissed indignantly, but it was too early to rejoice. Instead of choking on his own blood and collapsing dead, he turned into a pile of mud, from which Kimiko hastily pulled her hand away, jumping back. Was it really just a mud clone? Snake bonds. Something cold and slippery wrapped around her legs, and the girl didn't even have time to get scared when she found herself tied up to the waist by a huge snake, whose disgusting hiss made her heart beat faster. Stupid girl, Orochimaru hissed through Hinata's lips somewhere very close to Kimiko's ear. Your body will serve well in my research. I will unravel all the secrets of your improved genome. Kimiko shuddered, feeling the breath of Orochimaru, who had sharp fangs, on her neck. Surely now he will inject paralyzing poison into her body, and then nothing will save the girl. Fortunately, her hands were free. The daughter of the copy ninja was clearly not going to give up just like that. Forbidden technique, ring of darkness, she exclaimed, provoking the appearance of a field of black chakra, which spread out in all directions in a ring and threw the scientist away. The snake holding young Hatake loosened its grip, for the cells of its body, deprived of chakra, began to die, turning into nothing. Very soon there was nothing left of him except a handful of dust. And Kimiko directed a victorious glance at Orochimaru, who looked in bewilderment at his own hands, which were quickly turning a frightening dark purple and then black color. Very soon they, too, began to crumble into small particles, starting from the fingertips, and the scientist himself would very quickly suffer the same fate. But he had cheated death many times before, and this case was no exception. Kimiko grimaced as she saw Hinata's mouth opening unnaturally wide as she disintegrated into particles, and an exact copy of her slipped out, unharmed and covered in disgusting mucus. Rising to his full height, Orochimaru did not even look back at the discarded skin, which at that very moment, under the influence of enemy technology, ceased to exist. Hatake clenched her teeth, realizing that the battle was not over yet. Stretching his hand forward, the villain caused several snakes to quickly burst out from under his sleeve and fly towards the unsuspecting Hatake. She barely had time to jump to the side, and one of the snake heads flashed with lightning speed next to the gaping mouth. Snatching a kunai, the girl cut all the disgusting creatures with a deft blow, and Orochimaru had to shake his hand to free himself from the now useless snakes. Realizing that this was a good moment for a counterattack, Hatake quickly formed her seals, preparing a new deadly technique. Forbidden technique, Spear of Death. Having completed the combination of seals, the girl put both palms in front of her, in front of which in a couple of seconds an impressively sized sphere of black chakra grew. A moment later, the sphere shot out, turning into a giant spear, destroying everything in its path. Summoning technique, Rashomon Gate. The villain had already come up with a rescue plan and, quickly making the necessary seals and biting his finger, hit the ground with his palm. The ground shook, and with a deafening roar and clang, 5 metal gates with images of demons on the closed doors burst out of it. Each subsequent gate was higher, wider and thicker than the previous ones. The terrifying technique of the element of darkness, not inferior in power to the tailed bomb, broke through all the gates except the last one, which left an impressive dent. Kimiko hastened to cover her ears, since the ringing, which would not have been emitted by the loudest bell in the world, could simply burst her eardrums. Orochimaru also took precautions and removed his hands from his ears only when the gate fell back into the ground. His Byakugan with a snake pupil stopped at Hataka, who was breathing heavily, realizing that she had spent too much chakra, and all in vain. The scientist in Hinata's body licked his lips, anticipating a quick victory. "You seem to be completely exhausted, little Kimiko," he hissed, having thought of how to end his victim. He waved his hands, and snake fangs appeared on Hinata's fingertips. This was necessary for the villain's new technique, combining the art of the Hyuga clan and its snake jutsu. Hataki shuddered. Such a sight could not help but frighten her, considering that she had almost nothing to answer. "Hinata, stop!" Suddenly someone blocked her, appearing on the battlefield so suddenly that even Orochimaru slowed down for a moment. It was Hyuga Niji himself, pretty exhausted, wounded, but equally confident in what he was doing. "Niji! What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be fighting with?" "Yes. We have huge losses, and after Kaguya appeared, there was almost nothing left of our army," he sighed. "But when reinforcements arrived from Amigakure, the 6th instructed me to go to you and help deal with her." Hyuga took a fighting stance, activating his Byakugan, and looked at his cousin, who put on a creepy smile on her face when he appeared. Her eyes, which Niji noticed first, made the shinobi flinch. "Niji-kun," Hinata said in her old voice and added with a hiss characteristic of Orochimaru. "It's good that you came. Another pair of Byakugan will never be superfluous." "This is Orochimaru," Kimiko said and added to make the situation clearer. "He looks like this because he inhabited someone else's body. Of all the bodies, he chose my sister," Hyuga said in a broken voice. "Now it's clear what happened to Kurenai's team." He looked at the scientist, seeing with his Byakugan that a completely different chakra was flowing through the vessels in the girl's body. "Hinata, if you're still there, please stop," Hyuga managed, realizing that he didn't know what to do. He could not attack Orochimaru if there was still a chance to save Hinata. "You're trying in vain, Niji-kun, poor Hinata is no more," the dark-haired girl licked her lips. "But while you're here, let me show you the pinnacle of the Hyuga clan's art." The next moment, Orochimaru jumped up, his palms and fingers, on which extended snake fangs were still visible, glowed with a greenish chakra field. 8 trigrams, 128 stinging bites. Orochimaru exclaimed. Niji, rushing out of his seat, also imbued his palms with chakra, and they glowed with a barely visible bluish color. 8 trigrams, 128 heavenly touches. He shouted back. Kimiko could only watch as 2 Byakugan holders rushed towards each other, and then converged, synchronously delivering lightning-fast strikes. Orochimaru beat his fingers, trying to hit the enemy with snake fangs in the tenketsu and inject poison into his body. Niji attacked with his palms, although in reality he did not attack, but defended himself, parrying the enemy's blows to the sides. 2. 4. 8. 16. 32. They shouted at the same time. Their movements were so fast that Kimiko no longer had time to follow them. 64. The fierce duel of taijutsu techniques continued. The next moment, Niji, exhausted from past battles, missed several blows. As a result, several bites were added to his wounds. Only a couple of seconds passed, and Hyuga's movements slowed down. He was no longer able to hold the defense. Hinata, he squeezed out, looking his enemy straight in the eyes with all his strength. 128. Orochimaru hissed in response, piercing the Hyuga with many small holes through a lightning-fast series of blows, imperceptible to the eye of ordinary mortals. Before the eyes of Kimiko, who at that moment felt everything inside her shrink in horror, Neji fell dead. Falling onto his back, he stared with a forever frozen gaze at the sky, which seemed so calm against the backdrop of the chaos happening on Earth. "I've been thinking about it and decided that I'm unlikely to need your Byakugan," the scientist told the fallen warrior, passing by and heading straight to Kimiko. "Sorry, I got distracted. Where did I stop there?" The girl closed her eyes, trying to hold back her tears. The last time she failed to do this was after the death of her father, whom she had been looking for so long and in the end never said a word. Now. Neji was not particularly close to her, they barely had time to meet each other during the time when Konoha was recovering from the catastrophe that split it in two. But, nevertheless, he was part of her new family, who accepted her. And even if it was a small part, for Hatake, who had no one after the loss of her mother and Jiraiya-sensei, this part mattered. And now, having come to her defense, Hyuga was killed by the villain at the hands of his own sister. This heartbreaking sight again reminded Kimiko of the death of everyone she had lost, of the loneliness and fear that she experienced in Amigakure, which slowly destroyed her very being. "Little Kimiko, why are you crying?" Orochimaru hissed in a mocking tone. "I thought you were stronger in spirit. Remember who you are. Remember what brought you to Akatsuki. You are a loner, a killer, a monster. You are the monster here." Hatake muttered, wiping away tears with her palm, which the next second flared up with black chakra, this time so unstable that this energy looked not like a cloud, but like raging lightning, which Kimiko held in her own hand. Without remembering herself, she rushed to the attack, forgetting how dangerous and insidious the enemy was. The girl put all her power and all her feelings into her blow. Carried forward by her technique, she screamed furiously. "Stupid girl," the scientist hissed for the second time, realizing that it would not be difficult to evade the frontal attack. He was already preparing to step aside, but suddenly froze, realizing that his legs suddenly stopped obeying him. Is this really the work of Neji, who managed to block such significant tenketsu? "You, Hyuga," the scientist thought, deciding to shed his skin again to avoid death. He still had enough strength left for this. The next moment, Kimiko flew at the villain, plunging her hand, sparkling with lightning of darkness, into his stomach. Ignoring the pain of the mortal wound and feeling his body begin to crumble cell by cell, the scientist in Hinata's body opened his mouth wide, preparing to spit himself out. But Hatake did not stop there. When she pierced the enemy, the jutsu in her hand did not go out, and then she pulled out her palm and took off Orochimaru's head with one blow. The corpse of the beautiful Hinata, whom the villain had disfigured, collapsed to the ground, disintegrating into small particles. The same fate befell the head, which rolled towards Neji's body. Kimiko collapsed to the ground, exhausted, but knowing for sure that she had rid the world of the creature named Orochimaru. Once and for all. The beast's roar, accompanied by a terrifying wave of chakra, caused everything in the area to tremble. The frightened birds left their nests and, actively flapping their wings, rushed away. The trees moved their branches, clinging even tighter to the ground with their roots. Naruto covered himself with his hands from a burst of burning energy that nearly knocked him off his feet. But the main blow, of course, fell on the gorge itself, where the river water rushed with a roar. Two majestic statues depicting outstanding warriors of the past, Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, were covered with cracks, as were the walls of the gorge, in the center of which, on the raging surface of the water, there was a smaller copy of the Nine Tails, which had already grown its fifth tail. Naruto, who was watching this scene from above, stared in horror at Minato, who was transforming into the monster that he once was. It immediately became clear what the villagers were so afraid of, cursing and hating him from birth. So this is what it was like for his friends to watch his transformation. Minato saw him and opened his mouth, and along with his roar, a red beam of chakra shot out of it, threatening to incinerate our hero with one hit. But the Nine Tails, who had not yet had time to incarnate, clearly had problems with his aim, and the beam landed a little lower, hitting the wall of the gorge and provoking further destruction of the rock, which went in all directions. Joker hastily jumped back, watching as the place where he had just stood falls down, and with it another huge mass of rock falls on Minato in the form of pieces. The two statues were no exception. Even deeper cracks reached them, and first Madara and then Hashirama stopped serving as gates for the river falling down. The first statue fell on Minato, breaking into many fragments, and the second, which fell after, fell into two halves, and the gaze of the first Hokage, torn in half, with a seal folded in one hand, rushed into the sky. Naruto sighed, thinking that under the tons of rubble, even the Nine Tails chakra was unlikely to allow Minato to survive, and was going to look for a way to return to his comrades. But how wrong he was to underestimate the power that he himself once possessed. A chakra field that exploded somewhere under a mountain of stone blocks caused the entire pile of ruins to fly apart. In the process, the chakra set them on fire, and it became like a huge fireworks display, only instead of sparks there were giant stones similar to meteorites, one of which almost killed the Joker, who was saved only thanks to his reaction. At the epicenter of the explosion, the nine-tailed fox appeared in the flesh, freed from captivity and causing the Uzumaki to flinch. He remembered how Kyuubi was locked in his mind, and often imagined how suddenly the doors of the cage gates opened, and he was free. Then Naruto would be left alone with the uncontrollable enraged Bijou. Now it really happened. And the only joy was the fact that in reality Uzumaki had much more space than in the underground hall where the fox was once imprisoned in his mind. This is what saved him when the beast, having caught him with red eyes full of hatred, pushed off with its hind legs and jumped out of the gorge. The former Jinchuriki again had to retreat to avoid being crushed by the huge nine-tailed carcass. Looking for cover, he thought that the best option would be to hide in the forest located near the Valley of the End. This is exactly what the Joker did, hiding in the unknown, among the tree trunks, swaying with a frightened crack as the beast approached. He's close. The beast unleashed a furious blow on several trees closest to it. And they fell, broken like matchsticks. A roar was heard, and the ground shook. However, each step of the huge beast was also accompanied by tremors of the soil under its feet. The Uzumaki, who was hiding behind a tree trunk dangerously close to the beast, triumphantly formed a seal of concentration, because in search of shelter he managed to leave behind his cards, which Kyuubi, unknowingly, had just activated with his careless movements. A series of explosions engulfed the area behind in a cloud of greenish smoke with soporific properties. He was ready to celebrate his victory, but the Joker was again disappointed. The beast on unsteady paws opened its mouth, and there a terrifying black sphere was formed from multicolored bubbles. But instead of firing it when the Bijudama was finally saturated with destructive power, the Bijou bit it, and exploding in its mouth, the tailed bomb instantly brought the beast to its senses. Naruto cursed to himself, deciding to retreat again and think of a plan for further action, until the next black sphere, which the Nine Tails was already accumulating in his mouth, covered the area in which he was hiding. What? Where are we? Sasuke squeezed out, his voice suddenly filled with uncertainty. He looked around and recognized the familiar pictures of his native street, immersed in darkness and illuminated only by moonlight and dim lanterns. Ahead he could see the fuzzy outline of his brother, drilling him with the red lights of his Sharingans. The next moment, Itachi jumped up and rushed away, turning a corner and disappearing into the darkness. Stop! Sasuke shouted demandingly, groping for the tanto in his own hand and rushing after it. As soon as he also turned the corner, the Uchiha froze in place, seeing fences stained with blood and many bodies littering the street. Grimaces of pain and horror froze on the faces of those he once knew. Swallowing hard and still feeling a lump in his throat, he ran forward, his hand tightening his grip on the weapon. Having burst into his own house and running up the stairs, the Uchiha kicked out the sliding square door and froze, not believing his own eyes. A body in a blue dressing gown, stained with blood, lay at the feet of an old man in black and white, and the victim's head rolled somewhere to the side, leaving a dark red bloody trail behind it. Danzo himself, and it was he, raised his hand over. Sasuke knew that the second victim in this scene should have been his mother. But for some reason, in her place sat his former teammate, Mikoto, helplessly looking at the Uchiha frozen on the threshold. He looked up at the old man with half his face hidden by bandages and saw a bloodthirsty smile. After that, Shimura, with pleasure visible on his face, stabbed her in the back with the bloody tanto he was holding in his hand. "Stop it. Everything was wrong. It was you," Sasuke muttered, backing away. He was shaking all over, the Uchiha's breathing noticeably increased. Apparently, the illusion, which was almost impossible to distinguish from reality, made a strong impression on Itachi's brother. What he saw at first put him in a state of stupor, but at the sight of Danzo, the Uchiha seemed to remember something and instantly pulled himself together, raising his hands that had stopped shaking. His fingers quickly made some kind of seals, and black patterns crawled across the Uchiha's skin, stretching towards his right eye. Sucked into the eyeball of the former root member, the Fuinjutsu seals caused his whites to turn black, and now the crimson iris of the Sharingan began to appear even brighter. Sasuke blinked, after which the familiar room, then the house, and then the native street, drenched in blood and littered with corpses, dissolved, turning into nothingness. Itachi, again retreating to a safe distance, looked in amazement at his brother and the changes that had happened to him. He couldn't believe how one of the strongest techniques of his Mangekyo Sharingan was dispelled by his brother. A couple more moments, and Sasuke, frozen in place, returned to reality, first moving his hand with the tanto, then stepping forward. Soon there were no reminders of the illusion except that one of Sasuke's eyes was now black as night. "Danzo prepared me for a fight against you. He was well aware of your abilities and knew that you would try to use Tsukuyomi on me," the brunette informed him with a disgusting grimace of smugness on his face. "This once again proves that I'm right," Itachi muttered, moving away from his amazement. "He used me and my skills to his advantage just as much as he used you and your power. I showed you this scene for a reason. As I said, the author of the idea to exterminate our clan was Danzo. I became a weapon in his hands, believing that I was acting for the good of Konoha. Even after his death, you are the same weapon, the evil ghost of Danzo, broken and subject to his will." The brother spat, looking at him with hatred. It seems that Itachi's words did not convince him at all that his own beliefs were wrong. "It was you who broke me," he remarked. "And now you feed on illusions. Why did you show me Mikoto? She's nothing to me." "You're wrong," his brother answered, looking straight into Sasuke's eyes. "She is our mother. Real. Alive." Sasuke winced. "You're delusional." He grinned, deciding that since his brother could not confuse him with genjutsu, he would try to pull off the same trick in reality. "You know I'm right. And I've been thinking about this for a long time. You just don't believe it," Itachi continued. "She is alive. And all this time I was next to you, not remembering anything, but feeling in my soul that you are not strangers to each other." Sasuke laughed. It seems that Itachi no longer knew what to say, since he was talking such utter nonsense. "One thing I know for sure, you lost. You don't have any chakra left to use the Mangekyo Sharingan. And even if you are enough for one more attempt. Well, it seems that I have already proven that your jutsu is not scary for me," Sasuke said, pointing his tanto at his brother. He sighed, quickly looking at the Uchiha with a searching gaze. "Don't think that Danzo was able to reveal all my trump cards," the elder Uchiha responded coldly, pronouncing with disgust the name of the old man, who had become even more hated. "You can barely stand on your own feet. It was not hidden from his attentive gaze that despite the desire to remain confident, Sasuke was breathing heavily. This showed him to be tired. It seems that the latest technique has almost depleted all his reserves. He dispelled Tsukuyomi so easily. I doubt that Izanami will have an effect on him, Itachi thought. Koto Amatsukami. This is the only thing that would help me in this situation. But I already used it on Nagato. Indeed, one of the Uchiha's trump cards, never revealed to Danzo, was Shirsue's second eye, bequeathed by the owner to his best friend. What a pity that his 10-year reboot period has not yet come to an end. However, this was not the only thing Itachi inherited from his comrade. There is only one thing left, but there will be no turning back, flashed through the head of the older brother, who realized that the time had come to reveal all the secrets. The Uchiha closed his eyes, concentrating on something seemingly forgotten. He was again introduced to his comrade, to whose death Danzo also had a hand. It was symbolic that despite the fact that Shisui and Danzo were both already dead, now their legacy lived on in the two brothers who opposed each other. I failed you, Sasuke. But there's no other way out, we'll have to finish this here and now, no matter what the cost, he whispered quietly. Coward, Sasuke said, thinking that Itachi had given up and closed his eyes, allowing him to deliver the final blow. He grabbed the tanto more comfortably and released the remaining chakra into the blade, causing it to sparkle with lightning again. Rushing forward, the Uchiha struck, but to his surprise, the blade slipped through his brother's body without encountering any obstacles. As he rushed past, he turned around with a puzzled look on his face, and immediately winced when he saw that Itachi's dark hair had turned white as snow. The brother was safe and sound. What is this? He squeezed out, already realizing that he was seeing with his own eyes the trump card hidden from Danzo, which Itachi had been hiding in his sleeve all this time. Even his Sharingan could not comprehend the secret of the technique that his opponent used. It was something hitherto unprecedented, hidden by the prism of frightening uncertainty. Turning around, Itachi opened his eyes, in which the yellow Sharingan was burning. Sasuke noticed that Itachi's skin had also taken on a shade close to snow. The brother reached to his forehead in order, as it seemed to Sasuke, to adjust the protector with the Amigakure symbol. But, once in his hand, the protector was removed. This required absolutely nothing, because the bandage tied at the back simply went through his head. Was it really a technique from one of the Akatsuki that made his body intangible? No, Sasuke saw something else. Something incomprehensible to his mind. White Raven mode, Itachi answered, unclenching his fingers, and the next moment the protector fell to the ground, clinking a metal plate on the stone. He stepped forward, confidently, without any fear. Apparently, he was confident that his brother could no longer harm him. Sasuke looked at the sparkling tanto in his own hand and took off again, rushing at his brother with a furious cry. The cross punch that Sasuke managed to land before passing through his victim again did no damage. Sasuke thought that the moment he passed through his brother, he saw white feathers floating in the air. But after the Uchiha, stumbling, falling and rolling on the ground, turned around, the feathers again became one with the enemy, who thoughtfully looked at his hand, which for a moment became translucent, and then turned again to face the one who was not gave up trying to kill him. I don't understand anything, Sasuke whispered. It's like you're not there. What is this, another illusion? Then I will seal it. The Uchiha quickly made seals, but the black symbols that should have been absorbed into his eye did not appear. He repeated the operation, thinking that he had made some mistake due to haste or fatigue. But the jutsu again had no effect. Don't try to seal this illusion, Itachi explained. You won't be able to seal reality itself. Sasuke's fingers clenched on the handle of the faithful weapon, but the white-haired Uchiha extended his hand forward, and the next moment the weapon disappeared, leaving in its place several white feathers, which immediately disappeared into the air. What did you do? The brunette blurted out, not understanding anything. His brother's omnipotence left nothing but questions in his mind. Are you familiar with the myths about the White Raven, Sasuke? Itachi asked and, waiting until he shook his head negatively, forgetting about everything in the world and wanting to hear the answer to his question, his brother continued. According to the beliefs that precede the legend of Rikudo Sennin, everything that exists in our world was supposedly created by the White Raven. Sasuke remained silent, watching in fascination as Itachi's clothes, which had hitherto retained their natural light, also turned white and began to glow with the mysterious glow of chakra. He flew through the endless void of death, dropping feathers that lit the stars and gave life to those like us. He was a force that dissolved throughout our world as an echo of life. Even though Rikudo Sennin is considered the one who shared chakra with people, it was the White Raven who brought this chakra to our world. It was he who created life where we live. Itachi closed his eyes, feeling his unity with everything that belongs to this world. Ancient knowledge about everything and everyone poured into his consciousness, and not a single library in the world could compare with the wisdom that blossomed like a white flower in the now boundless consciousness of the Uchiha. The shinobi sighed and realized that he felt this world as his own body. All space and time. The earth contained the echo of the past, and the hope of a future that had not yet become reality was in the air. Sasuke was very close. Previously consumed by the darkness of the desire for revenge and now blinded by the light that his brother exuded. Against the backdrop of this light, Itachi's own dark past was a black dot, lost in endless whiteness, as soon as one looked away from it. That bloody day of massacre of the Uchiha clan, Konoha itself with all the tragedies that have occurred since its founding, the bloody millennia that shook the land of fire and the surrounding lands that then had no names. All this seemed so insignificant at that moment, when the world became clear and as simple as the first lesson at the academy. Now I have become an echo of the Raven, Itachi continued, without opening his eyes. His flapping of wings in the endless confrontation between life and death. Cutting off his connection with the future, which, like a maze with thousands of options for how to get through it, distracted him from the present, the Uchiha focused on what was happening around them. Not so far away, the largest and bloodiest battle in the known history of shinobi continued. Under the onslaught of Kagaya and the white creatures, the combined army of Konohagakure, Tsunagakure, Kumogakure, Iwagakure and Amigakure retreated back, away from the great tree, guarded by Zetsu, contentedly contemplating the chaos that had come to this world. Somewhere there, Kimiko, deprived of her strength, lay on the ground near Niji and the defeated Orochimaru in Hinata's body. Somewhere there, Mikoto, who had already covered a considerable distance, was rushing towards the tree from the direction of the castle of the Land of Iron. And far, far away, near the Valley of the End, the battle between Naruto and the nine-tailed fox continued, and the first was also close to defeat. It can't be, Sasuke whispered. Itachi smiled, realizing that now was just the right moment to prove to his stupid little brother that nothing was impossible. The next moment, the tree, visible somewhere in the distance, disintegrated into many white feathers, quickly dissolving into the air. The shinobi army and the white Zetsu army pushing it back stopped. Everyone looked back at the great tree, disappearing before their eyes. Even Kagaya, floating in the air above the mortals who had previously fled from her wrath, glanced over her shoulder, a look of genuine amazement on her face. Following the tree, with a desperate cry, Zetsu dissolved, falling into the abyss, under which the support disappeared. The last thing to cease to exist was the Rinnegan in his eyes, having never had time to serve the complete resurrection of his mother. The Zetsu, who had previously shown no emotion, began to look at each other with concern, after which, one after another, they also began to turn into nothing. Kagaya watched with horror as the army created for her arrival in this world ceased to exist. She seemed to understand what was happening. The wounds of the members of the United Alliance army began to heal. Those who fell and received life-threatening injuries began to miraculously recover and get back on their feet. Kimiko, whose strength had returned, stood up and screamed in surprise when Niji, who had returned to life, stirred next to her. A breathless Mikoto landed nearby with an extremely confused face, and hurried to ask if everything was okay. The Uchiha continued to make changes to the universe and focused on Kaguya, deciding to erase her from the bearer of reality in the same way as he had previously done with the tree and Zetsu. Alas, it didn't work out for him, as if the White Raven's power extended to everything except the Otsutsuki. She, it seems, also felt his presence and, realizing that Itachi was powerless against her, smiled. A guest from another world. I have no power here, muttered the white-haired Uchiha, wincing, and transferred his attention to another place, not wanting to waste time, which was already running short. What are you doing? Sasuke was surprised, not understanding anything. I'm making my wing flap, Itachi responded, focusing on the 9 tails, which had Naruto cornered. Divine intervention over longer distances was no less effective. When Uzumaki was ready to seal the 9 tails within himself with one of his techniques. Not knowing for sure whether he would survive or not, the beast also ceased to exist, leaving behind white feathers dissolving into the air. Concentrating on restoring Naruto's strength, Itachi frowned as if he had felt something strange in the Uzumaki with his omnipresent fingers, and then opened his eyes. The Joker was little more than a point in the infinity of existence. And when Itachi touched this point, he felt a connection with Sasuke. I see, he muttered and, smiling, opened his eyes. It's a little more complicated than I thought. Sasuke flinched when the Uchiha stepped towards him. After what his brother had demonstrated, and considering that a few minutes ago they had been fighting tooth and nail, it was only natural to be afraid of him. But Sasuke was surprised to feel that when he saw his brother, the incarnation of the White Raven, he no longer felt the desire to finish him off. Danzo's will, which grabbed him with a death grip and directed him on the path of revenge, seemed to immediately let go of the Uchiha. It seems that the White Raven did not want him dead. But why then is he raising his hand? It seems my flight has come to an end. But I have unfinished business that I can entrust only to you, Itachi said, and Sasuke felt the touch of 2 fingers on his forehead. Immediately, all the thoughts that worried him dissolved, as if someone had cleaned up his mind. And the body regained the strength that the Uchiha had wasted during this difficult battle. Return to your friends, protect this world from her invasion. Sasuke looked at Itachi and saw a sincere smile on his face. He felt his heart pound painfully in his chest. Will tears now appear in his eyes, which have looked down on everyone for many years? Wait, is this the end? He squeezed out, feeling that what he had wanted for so long would now turn into grief for him. But Itachi had already disappeared into thin air, leaving Sasuke alone with the black moon tattoo that appeared on his palm. Sasuke closed his eyes, still feeling his brother's touch on his forehead, even though a gust of wind sharply and mercilessly blew away a small white feather of light. All that remained after Itachi's figure disappeared into the air. The brunette clenched his teeth, realizing that a tear was rolling down his cheek. The trained chain dog Danzo did not allow himself to cry, considering it a weakness. But now he really was weak, because the entire familiar world around the Uchiha was cracked and showered with fragments, and now he did not have a clear idea of what was right and what was wrong. Touching his brother's forehead for the last time, Itachi managed to convey to him his own memories, which, like Fuinjutsu, were now imprinted into the consciousness of the confused shinobi. Among them were both happy and scary. The frames replaced each other so quickly that Sasuke did not have time to enjoy the happy days of the Uchiha family, which flashed past no longer than a moment. But he also did not have enough time to worry about the difficult moments in his brother's life and the trials that fell on his shoulders. Familiar faces from his distant childhood appeared before his eyes. Mother and father, long-forgotten uncle and aunt, cousins who lived on the other side of the block, smiling neighbors, even Itachi's best friend named Shursui. The latter, as it turned out, was associated with a lot of memories. Apparently, the brother often remembered his comrade after his death, experiencing his loss for a long time. Having learned the secret of Sasuke's death, Sasuke heard his words said to Itachi in parting. The place that you and I found. The wisdom that you have gained. You have the courage to do what I could not, Itachi. But use it wisely, because there is no turning back. May you have my second eye. I'm sure you'll find it useful. I'll keep an eye on you, my friend. Sasuke quickly guessed what wisdom Sasuke was talking about. But where and how he and Itachi discovered this secret, forgotten for centuries, remained a secret to him. He again flashed through the prism of thoughts, images and memories and saw a completely different picture. This is the only way to prevent a coup in the village. Danzo's disgusting voice sounded very close, to whom Sasuke served faithfully for years, not imagining how he betrayed his family. We discussed this with Hiruzen and the advisors. And the majority voted for the extermination of the Uchiha clan. You are our most loyal agent, Itachi, the one who cares about the fate of the village, the only one who can do this. But Sasuke, he doesn't know about the conspiracy. I can't. So be it, we will let him live if you carry out my order, Shimura said coldly, looking at Itachi bending in front of him with an eye free from bandages. Don't let me down, otherwise the boy will suffer hellish torment. Sasuke winced. Even then, even without knowing Shimura, he was a tool for the treacherous old man with which he could achieve goals without getting his hands dirty. Through Itachi's eyes, the long scene of the massacre of the clan members looked even more terrible. The Uchiha was not alone. With him was someone calling himself Madara, a masked man who was the real leader of Akatsuki. The brunette stood still, looking into the emptiness in which Itachi had gone to terrible lengths for him. And the worst thing was that, having again seen the massacre of his parents, the brunette realized how much the matured Mikoto looked like his mother. His brother's words echoed in his head, leading the Uchiha, completely lost in the ghosts of the past, to think that Mikoto was his mother. In Akatsuki, Itachi did not immediately find like-minded people who did not share the views of the masked man, who firmly believed in the plan. But it was this plan that was developed and almost brought to life by Zetsu, the one who was hiding in the shadows and pulling the strings all this time. At first, everyone in this creepy organization was strangers, and their methods, even to Itachi, who slaughtered his family, seemed inhumane. One has only to remember how Pain defeated his teacher Jiraiya and crucified his body for everyone to see. When the question arose about recruiting newcomers to the organization, Kimiko ended up in Akatsuki, from which Tobi and Nagato, wholly subordinate to him, tried to make their own weapon, exactly the same as the one Sasuke used to serve Danzo. But Itachi and Konan, who was not indifferent to the girl's fate, saved her from this fate by hiding her from the masked man. Konan then convinced Itachi to use Sasuke's Kodo Amatsukami technique on Nagato to open his eyes to the world. It was then that Itachi found his new best friend, with whom he jointly came up with a way to confront Tobi and destroy Akatsuki from the inside. As a result of the split, the only surviving members of Akatsuki were Itachi and Zetsu. The first decided to take care of the village, which had lost its leader, while the second, having lost all the puppets, began to look for new allies in the person of Orochimaru and his subordinates and with his own efforts began to implement the plan. Sasuke wiped his eyes with his sleeve and, looking into the water lens, lonely waving in the wind on stony ground, he froze, discovering changes in his own appearance. The Sharingan in the left eye took on a pattern of a red star on a black background, and the left eyeball became completely purple, with concentric circles radiating around the pupil. The Rinnegan was different from the one Zetsu wielded. He was wearing several black tomo. Not understanding what was happening, the Uchiha sat down and, touching the surface of the water with his barely trembling hand, made his own image dissolve. But after some time, the same picture appeared again on the agitated water. An explosion was heard in the distance, and Sasuke jumped up, realizing that the time had come to fulfill his brother's last wish. Somewhere there was Mikoto, the truth about which Sasuke was still figuring out in his head, and Kimiko, who was not indifferent to his older brother. And somewhere there was Naruto, with whom, judging by the memories opening in his mind about the confrontation between their reincarnations, this time they had to fight on the same side of the barricades. Joker froze in place, looking at the sun tattoo that appeared on his palm. After an unknown miracle saved him from the Nine Tails, simply erasing him from reality, Uzumaki felt that part of this universal power, capable of anything, had touched him. The edges of his human self began to blur, and Naruto fell to his knees, clutching his head. It seemed to him that someone else had entered there and was putting things in order in his mind. It was so similar to how the nine-tailed fox had once tried to take possession of him that Uzumaki automatically began to concentrate on the memories that made him him. He recalled all the darkest and brightest things that happened in his difficult life. But this time it was not the Kyuubi, and instead of extinguishing the Joker's stream of thoughts, several more of the same streams merged with him. Intertwined with his consciousness, alien entities replayed memories before his eyes, whispered in his ear thoughts that no longer seemed so alien, and conveyed to him the experience of past reincarnations, with which the shinobi suddenly had a direct connection. Accustomed to hearing only his own abrupt voices of thoughts in his head, the former Jinchuriki was incredibly frightened by the echo of his own incarnations of the past, which, having revealed to him the secret of their existence, told him what and how to do. And it was not so easy to scare our hero. The Joker realized that the pain had subsided only when the voices died down at once, and his mind became quieter than ever before. Shinobi was able to look at the world with new eyes, realizing that now it seems different, more understandable, as if the Joker had seen it in past lives more than once. With new eyes, of course, in a figurative sense. Uzumaki did not change at all in appearance, only the mysterious tattoo on his hand, with which his mysterious internal transformation began, spoke of the changes that had occurred in him. He seemed to be fine. Moreover, the wounds received during the fight with Minato had healed, and the chakra reserve was now full to the brim. He stood up and looked around the forest with a sigh. The fact that the Nine Tails had once rampaged here was only reminiscent of the destruction it caused. A lot of trees were felled, some of them were engulfed in flames, and craters from the tailed bombs could be seen in the ground. Thinking about how he could get back, Joker wanted to get the card in which he had sealed Minato's spatial technique, but he remembered that just a few moments ago he had dropped it and lost it forever while fleeing. Most likely, she burned in one of the furious techniques of the enraged Biju. However, one of the voices in the Joker's mind told him that not everything was over yet, and then the former Jinchuriki took out a new card from the deck and, closing his eyes, instantly remembered how this technique looked and worked. He even understood the principle of its use, although he had never studied this jutsu in detail. It was as if some pattern of this technique was already familiar to him. The image of the white-haired second Hokage appeared in his mind, and it was so clear, as if the Joker had actually once seen him with his own eyes. Flight of the Thunder God, Naruto whispered, remembering exactly the name of his father's technique that Minato used against him in battle. The next moment, a landmark appeared in his mind where this technique would lead. And at the same time, Joker remembered how his enemy, defeated by some force, once moved with the help of the flight of the Thunder God to Sasuke. Therefore, he probably carried with him something with a seal that served as a portal for technology. Joker clenched his fist. "I'm coming, Sasuke. And if you manage to do something bad there, you'll obviously be in trouble," he promised the Uchiha in his thoughts. What happened? Guy squeezed out in surprise, looking at his own hand, which was no longer covered with the fiery red aura of the eighth gate, which the sixth Hokage managed to open shortly before the disappearance of the tree. Fortunately for him, he did not feel the consequences of opening the doors of death. But if it weren't for Itachi, the green beast of Konoha would certainly have died without defeating Kaguya, against whom even such strength seemed nothing. But what surprised the surviving shinobi even more was that their fallen comrades began to rise to their feet, as if someone had rewinded time. The ninja shouted joyfully, hugged and rejoiced, and the fact that nothing was over was reminded only by a figure hovering in the sky with long white hair fluttering in the wind. Kaguya Otsutsuki, and it was she, looked down in disbelief, where everyone who had known her anger returned to life. The rabbit goddess wondered where the tree and all her allies had gone. It seems that the plan for her complete resurrection was doomed to failure. But she knew one thing for sure: here, even not at full strength, she was stronger than any mortal. And it would not be difficult for her to again destroy the army raised by the White Raven. "Niji, are you alive?" Kimiko whispered, squeezing Hyuga's hand, who opened his eyes for the second time and saw a white-haired kunoichi above him, in whose green eyes misunderstanding and fear were visible. "Did you scream so loudly?" "My eardrums almost burst," Niji responded. "It's hard to scare me, but your return," she answered, trying to find the words, but couldn't. "And Hinata?" Hyuga asked, hope flashing in his eyes. But Hataki just shook her head. Niji's sister's body mysteriously disappeared into thin air. However, this is for the better. The worst thing for him would be now to see the headless body, which was used as a vessel by the villain defeated by their joint efforts. She helped Hyuga get up, and just at that moment Shikamaru, Choji, Tenten and Lee arrived at them. "Are you okay, guys?" Lee blurted out, offering Niji his shoulder. However, this was no longer necessary, because he had already finally come to his senses. They nodded. And while his comrades rejoiced at being alive and well, Nara looked thoughtfully at Kaguya, hovering in the air and casting angry glances at the jubilant Alliance army. "This is not good," Shikamaru muttered, checking the ammunition in his pouch with his only hand. "As soon as she recovers from the shock, she will attack our people again, and then it will be bad. I hope you have some kind of plan." Akimichi asked his comrade, knowing that his teammate was right. "The only way to defeat her is to seal her," Nara answered, not taking his eyes off the Otsutsuki, which began to slowly gain altitude. "Moreover, I need a technique more powerful than my shadow sealing jutsu. Plus, for my technique to work, I need to make it touch the ground. Maybe mine will work?" Kimiko suggested. "I have one powerful fuinjutsu that can seal anything. But it will require a lot of chakra, I will need to drain it from you." Hataki looked around at everyone present. And only Lee dared to ask an immodest question. "How? What about Mikoto at Root's underground base?" "Lee, are you really crazy to think about that in a situation like this?" Tenten was indignant, fighting the desire to hit her teammate with a fighting pole. The girl stared at his rounded eyes and laughed, after which she disappointed Gustabrovic and pleased the tense Tenten with a hasty answer. "Kiss of darkness? No, there's no time for that now. Everyone needs to stand in a circle and," she looked at Shikamaru, "ideally hold hands. However, any touch is enough." The shinobi complied with her request, standing in a circle and holding hands. Choji stood on the other side of Shikamaru, where his arm was missing, and placed his hand on his comrade's back. The next moment, Kimiko Hataki's palms found themselves in black clouds of darkness element chakra, which, however, appeared in almost all of her techniques, and then began to spread in the form of a cover. First, a black aura enveloped Kimiko herself, then everyone else. "Now close your eyes and don't resist. Forbidden technique, absorption," she commanded, taking a breath and beginning to suck the black chakra back along with the energy that it had managed to accumulate. When everything was ready, the circle members unclasped their hands. Feeling weak. Although Hataki tried to act carefully, she drained almost everything from her friends. When the last black bubble of chakra disappeared in Kimiko's mouth, and not a trace remained of the covering on herself, she licked her lips and looked resolutely up, feeling how she was bursting with chakra. "I hope you know what you're doing," Shikamaru squeezed out, dropping to one knee, since even his legs were now difficult to obey. "This is a technique of the Akechi clan, developed against the Four Tails and Five Tails and is capable of erasing and sealing them forever. It was never used against the tailed ones, but the servants of the first Tsuchikage somehow defeated the demon that attacked Iwagakure with it, Hatake explained. Perhaps its power would be enough to destroy that huge tree. So I think this lady is doomed. Why are you delaying? Niji asked, noticing that Kimiko was in no hurry to make the seals. You need to wait, concentrate and aim well so that you don't hit anyone, Jean answered. In the past, this technique almost destroyed my entire village and claimed many lives. Fortunately, Kaguya continued to fly higher and higher, apparently also preparing some kind of technique to cover all her enemies at once with one attack. The white-robed figure stopped only when its Byakugan detected an unusual accumulation of black chakra. The goddess's eyes looked straight at Kimiko, and at that very moment, Hatake quickly made a series of seals and said, "Forbidden technique, black hole." The whole sky was cracked by a funnel that opened in it, so black that even the sunlight began to drown in it. The next moment, Kaguya, along with the clouds among which she was floating, began to be sucked inside. Kimiko winced as she felt a trickle of blood flow from her nose and completed a series of seals, causing the funnel to slam shut, swallowing everything nearby. All the shinobi, including the Kage, looked up at this mesmerizing spectacle, and then rejoiced again, ready to celebrate the victory. I don't see her, Niji muttered, using the last of his chakra to activate his Byakugan and look up at the sky. Well done, Kimiko. You did it. Tenten exclaimed. Kimiko wiped away the blood and also sat down on the ground, because after this she needed a long rest. There was relief on the white-haired Kunoichi's face. She coped with her task and, it seems, even saved the world. My soul felt light and serene. This hasn't happened to her for a long time. Probably since childhood, when Jean was a little carefree girl discovering a new world with a hermit from Mount Myabokuzen named Jiraiya. It's all behind us, she whispered. What happiness! Stop! Hyuga suddenly exclaimed, realizing that a white dot had appeared in the sky again. It can't be. It's her. Hatake shuddered and looked up in shock at the sky. How is this possible? This technique erases everything caught in it clean and seals the remaining chakra in the void world. There is no way back from there. She said sadly. The moment before your technique slammed shut, I saw it disappear, Niji said uncertainly. I thought that's how your jutsu worked. Perhaps she used some kind of spatial technique, and it saved her life, Shikamaru suggested and, as in most cases, he was right. Look, we made her angry, Choji pointed his finger at the sky. Indeed, something terrible was brewing in the skies. Furious lightning sparkled in the thickening clouds, and Kaguya disappeared into the curtain that flashed over and over again. Thunder rumbled angrily several times, and then a flash burst from the sky and rushed with lightning-infused light in the shape of a giant fist, capable of crushing a good half of the Alliance army with a single blow. Everyone closed their eyes from the blinding light, preparing for the inevitable end, but the terrifying technique did not crush our heroes, but crashed into a giant shield that appeared out of nowhere, which was held by a giant woven from blood-red chakra. Mirror Yata. So big, Kimiko couldn't believe her eyes, looking up in shock. She knew the name of this shield, as well as who its owner was. But the only time Hatake had the honor of seeing it during a demonstration of her powers in Akatsuki, Itachi's shield and Susanoo were significantly smaller, and their color was slightly different. According to legend, this shield was able to withstand any blow, adapting to any element. It was with this shield that the Uchiha was able to defend himself even from her darkness techniques. The majestic ghostly giant of the unknown savior bent under such power, but continued to hold the shield over the army of shinobi, who, from such a height, probably seemed like pitiful ants. This one differed from all the Susanoos that anyone had seen before in that it had a clearly defined female figure. The translucent Atlantean warrior was dressed in armor that emphasized all the contours of a powerful, but at the same time graceful body. No one saw the face of the giant savior, but everyone could clearly see that the long hair falling down her back was blazing with a frantic scarlet flame. The shield was attached to a hand with 6 fingers. The warrior Susanoo supported the artifact with her other hand, resting her palm on the translucent surface of the mirror of Yata and using all her strength to hold back the onslaught of the angry goddess. Niji strained his Byakugan to see who was the master of this great something, directing Susanoo with his will from the crystal in the forehead of the humanoid warrior, but then another fist fell on the shield, and it shattered into pieces. The shock wave, which reached the ground like a storm, crushed all the shinobi to the ground, preventing them from moving. The ghostly warrior, who took the brunt of the blow after the shield disappeared, became covered in cracks and, having lost her stable position, began to fall, trying to crush the helpless people. Fortunately for the latter and unfortunately for the one inside, the Susanoo technique dissipated while still in flight, and everyone saw only the silhouette of a dark-haired girl flying down like a stone. "Mikoto," Shikamaru whispered, realizing who exactly saved them this time. The kunoichi's fall would certainly have ended in tears if not for someone's shadow, barely perceptible to the naked eye, sliding past in a swift arc and picking up the Uchiha. Mikoto, barely alive after the incident, gathered her last strength to open her eyes, from which tears flowed over the loss of Itachi. She saw her savior, who, as her heart already told her, was Sasuke, and smiled.